Hey, glad you're here. Get comfy, settle in, and let's ease into a slow story from Greece before Troy. Not the marble Greece of postcards and museums. Not the Greece of philosophers debating in bright sunlight. This is earlier, rougher, heavier. A world of stone walls and smoke-dark halls, where power sits behind a gate and where a person's name can be worth more than their life. You wake up in the late Bronze Age, somewhere around the time tradition places the Trojan War, roughly in the 12th or 13th century before the Common Era. The exact year is impossible to pin down, because your world does not count time with calendars that survive neatly to us. Your world counts time with births, feasts, raids, and funerals. With the harvest, with the first storms, with the last ship that never returned. You are not waking up as a farmer. You are waking up as the kind of person the old songs call a hero. And that word does not mean what it means today. A hero here is not a caped savior. A hero is a high-status fighting man, a leader in training or a leader already. Someone whose life is meant to be seen, judged, repeated, and sung. Your value is measured in public, in how you speak at a feast, in how you keep your temper when someone tries to shame you, in how you hold a spear, in how many men will follow you when you step forward, in how much you can give away and still remain powerful. Because generosity is not softness in this world, it is control. When you give a gift, you are not only being kind, you are tying a knot. You are making someone remember you. You are building a small bridge that might carry you over a future disaster. And disasters are common. Your home is not a quiet village with a church bell and a market square. Your home is a fortified place. A citadel on a rise, ringed with stone, watching fields and roads below. In the distance you might see the sea, if you live near it. Or you might see the backs of mountains, dark and sharp, cutting the horizon like broken teeth. If you are lucky, you live close enough to the water that ships can come and go. Salt air brings news. Visitors bring gifts and danger in equal measure. If you are unlucky, you live inland, where roads are narrow and steep and travel is slow. News still comes, but it arrives late, carried by tired men with dust on their calves. Either way, you are surrounded by reminders that this world is not safe. The walls exist for a reason. They are not decorative. They are a promise. Inside these walls, someone has decided what counts as order and what counts as threat. And if you are a hero, you are one of the tools that keeps that promise. When you open your eyes, you smell smoke first. Not because the house is on fire, because smoke is part of daily life. Hearth smoke, cooking smoke, the slow burn of wood that keeps a hall warm at night. You hear movement before you see it. Sandals on stone. A dog shifting and shaking its ears. A servant whispering to another servant. A horse stamping somewhere beyond a wall. A kettle being set near coals. If you sleep in the main hall, you are not alone. Few people are alone here. Privacy exists for the very high, and even they share their world with attendants, guards, family, guests, and the constant pressure of watching eyes. Your household is your identity. Your household is not only your family. It is also your workers, your dependents, your guards, your herdsmen, the craftsmen who keep your gear usable, the women who spin and weave, the men who keep accounts, the people who move through storerooms like blood through veins. In a palatial center, those storerooms are the true heartbeat. Because the wealth of this world is not stacks of coin. It is food and animals. It is stored grain. It is oil sealed in jars. It is wine measured carefully. It is wool and cloth. It is bronze, precious and limited, because bronze is not a single thing. It requires copper and tin is not easy to come by. So when you see bronze, you are looking at a network, a chain of relationships that stretches across the sea, a trail of trade, gifts, and bargaining. And also, sometimes, theft. Your world runs on exchange. Sometimes it is polite. A cup offered to a guest. A cloak placed on someone's shoulders. A promise sealed over a shared meal. Sometimes it is violent. A ship appears on the horizon. Men land quickly. They take animals. They take metal. They take people. And by the time the alarm reaches the nearest watchpost, the sea has already swallowed them. That is why the coastline is watched. That is why oaths matter. That is why your father cares about who sits near him at the feast. A hero's world is built from connections, and every connection can become a weapon. Now look at the place you live. If you are in a major center, there is a palace complex with a great hall at its core. Later generations will call this sort of hall a megaron, a long room with an open porch at the front and a central hearth under a roof opening that lets smoke escape. Inside, the space is designed for authority. The hearth is not only for warmth, it is for gathering. The seat of power is not hidden away. It is placed where everyone can see it. If your household is wealthy enough, the walls may be painted with bright scenes. Bulls, processions, patterns, symbols that make the room feel alive even on the gray days. And the most important feature is simple. The fact that this hall can hold people. It can hold a crowd. A crowd can become a chorus. A chorus can become reputation. Reputation can become protection. This is why heroes care so much about how they appear. They are living inside a social spotlight long before anyone invents a stage. At the top of the social ladder, above you or beside you depending on your birth, sits the ruler of the place. The palace administration uses titles that survive on clay tablets, written in a script we call Linear B, the earliest attested form of Greek writing. Those tablets are not poems. They are lists and records. They count goods and people and obligations. In other words, your world is organized. Not modern, not gentle, but organized. There is a king-like figure, often called the Wanax in the tablet language, with authority tied to religion, wealth, and war leadership. Below him are powerful officials and elite companions. Some appear to be high-ranking warrior leaders. Others supervise land, herds, workshops, and the flow of goods. And then there are the fighting men. The ones whose job is to be ready. The ones who can be called up. The ones who train and travel and guard. A hero belongs to that layer, even if he is also a prince. Because the core expectation is the same. When things go wrong, you are supposed to step forward. Not because you are kind, because you are built for it. In this world, strength is not only physical, it is social. It is the ability to command, to speak in public, to give orders that are obeyed, to keep your friends close, to keep your rivals close enough that you can see what they're doing. A hero grows up learning these rules without anyone naming them. You learn them the first time you watch a dispute in the hall. A farmer accusing another farmer of moving a boundary stone. A shepherd complaining about stolen animals. A messenger arriving with a complaint from a neighboring leader. A guest who asks for help and is offered food before anyone asks his name. Hospitality is not a cute custom here. It is survival behavior. You feed the stranger because the stranger might be important. You feed the stranger because the gods might punish you if you refuse. You feed the stranger because tomorrow you might be the stranger. And when you send him away, you do not send him away empty. A gift is a receipt. It is proof that your house is strong. It is proof that your house is civilized. It is also proof that someone now owes you something, even if they never say it out loud. This is what hero life looks like when the songs are not singing. It is meetings. It is politics. It is watching faces. It is learning who is loyal and who is pretending. Because before Troy, Greece is not one united country. It is a patchwork of kingdoms and islands and coastal towns, each with their own leaders and grudges and alliances. Some are large. Some are small. Some are little more than a strong family on a hill with a few good boats. And all of them are trying to stay alive in a world where the sea connects everyone and also exposes everyone. Think about the geography. The Aegean is full of islands, scattered like stepping stones. A short sail can take you from one shore to another. A longer sail can take you into waters where different languages are spoken, where the pottery looks unfamiliar, where the gods may have different names. In this period, ships already use both oars and sails, depending on the wind and the urgency. Sea travel is not a luxury pastime. It is a normal part of elite life. It is how you trade. It is how you raid. It is how you visit. It is how you gather allies. It is how you carry news. It is how you prove you are someone who matters. If you are a young hero, voyages are part of your education. Not necessarily epic adventures with monsters. More often, tense, practical trips. A narrow deck. Wet rope in your hands. Blisters from the oar. Salt crusting on your skin. The taste of dry bread and onions. The constant watch for storms. The constant watch for other ships. You learn quickly that the sea is not romantic. The sea is a mood. It can carry you smoothly like a gentle hand. It can also throw you around until you understand how small you are. So you make offerings. You pour a little wine onto the ground before leaving. You throw a pinch of barley into the fire. You promise something to a god if you return. You do not need to see a god to believe the god is listening. The divine is present in this world the way weather is present, not always visible, always felt. Now, the part that matters for our story. Why is this called Before Troy? Because there is a sense, in later Greek memory, that the Trojan expedition is the moment when all these separate heroic lives are pulled into the same net. Before that, hero life is busy, but it is local. You fight for your household. You defend your coast. You settle a feud. You travel to secure a marriage alliance. You escort an envoy. You lead a small raid. You bargain over cattle. You host a feast. You listen for rumors about neighbors. You watch the ambitions of your cousins. You try to keep the peace at home long enough to build your name. And the thing you build is not money. It is status. The Greeks of later poetry have words for this social fuel: honor, esteem, the kind of worth that exists only when other people recognize it. That recognition is addictive. It makes men do reckless things. It makes men hold grudges for years. It makes men go to war because refusing would be humiliating. Because humiliation is not only personal, it stains your whole household. It tells your allies that you are weak. It invites trouble. So a hero is always balancing. If you stay home, you keep your family safe. But if you stay home too long, people forget you. They stop singing your name. They stop fearing your anger. They stop valuing your friendship. And in a world like this, being forgotten is a quiet kind of death. That is the pressure that shapes everything. Even the way you stand. Even the way you laugh. Even the way you accept a cup from a rival, pretending you did not notice the insult that was hidden in his greeting. Now imagine stepping out into the morning. The air is cool. The stone under your feet holds the night's chill. You can smell animals below the citadel: sheep, goats, cattle, all of it mixing with smoke and damp earth. Somewhere, metal rings against metal as a craftsman begins work. A guard calls to another guard on the wall. You look out over fields that are not only scenery, they are the difference between plenty and hunger, between calm and rebellion, between a feast that builds loyalty and a winter that cracks your power. So even before Troy, your hero life is not endless celebration. It is responsibility. The people below you do not love you because you are brave. They rely on you because you are useful. They accept you because the alternative is chaos. And you accept them because their labor becomes your strength. This is the deal. This is how palatial society holds together. A ruler and his elite distribute goods and protection. In return, the land produces, the workshops produce, the people serve, and the war band gathers when called. If you want a simple picture, think of it like a body. The palace is the stomach and the heart. It stores. It pumps. It decides where resources go. The villages and farms are the limbs. They work. They move. They carry weight. And the heroes are the hands, the part of the body that reaches out, that grips, that strikes, that offers gifts, that shakes hands, that holds the spear steady. In a moment, we are going to move deeper into what makes someone hero-shaped in this world. The training, the expectations, the subtle ways a child is taught to become dangerous. But for now, let's stay right here in the morning. Feel the weight of your name. Because in this world, your name is not just a label. It is your passport. It is your shield. It is your debt. And it is your destiny. When people speak about you, they do not speak only about you. They speak about your father, your mother, your lineage, your household, the guests your family hosted, the oaths your family swore, the fights your family started, the fights your family ended. Before Troy, every hero lives inside that web. And the closer we get to the Trojan expedition, the tighter that web becomes, until it starts pulling even the most stubborn kings toward the same horizon. If you grow up in this world with a plow in your hands, your life is measured in seasons. If you grow up with a spear meant for you, your life is measured in eyes. Who is watching? Who is impressed? Who is offended? Who is waiting for you to slip? A future hero is not made in one dramatic moment. He is shaped slowly, like a blade that takes years of hammering before it holds an edge. And the shaping begins before you can even remember it. Your birth is not only a family event, it's a political event. In a palace household, a child means future alliances, future inheritance, future leverage. If you are the first son, people start counting on you the way they count on stored grain. If you are a later son, people start guessing what you'll do with your hunger. Because younger sons can be loyal, or they can be trouble, and everyone knows it. You are named early, and your name is never truly just yours. It's tied to your father's name, and to the story people already tell about your house. In the heroic tradition, that link is constant. You are so-and-so's son. Not because your culture is poetic, but because lineage is your resume. When someone wants to praise you, they mention your father. When someone wants to insult you, they mention your father. If they can stain the house, they can shrink you. Even before you speak, you are living inside the reputation of the people who raised you. A high-status child is surrounded. Nurses, attendants, older relatives, servants moving in and out with food and cloth and water. The heroic stories love to focus on fathers and weapons, but the first hands that keep you alive are usually women's hands. They teach you the first rules without speeches. You learn when to be quiet, when to look down, when to look straight ahead. You learn the difference between a guest and a stranger. You learn the sound of your household's mood. A calm hall has one kind of noise. A tense hall has another. And before you understand politics, your body understands it. You learn that some adults can raise their voice at you. Others cannot. You learn that certain names make people stand up. You learn that a gift offered to the wrong person can start a fight. You learn that the ruler's anger changes the whole air in the room. All of that is training. It's just not the kind that leaves bruises. A child in a powerful household is not allowed to be just a kid for very long. There's affection, yes. There's pride. But there is also the constant pressure of being watched by older men who are deciding whether you will be a strong leader someday or a weak link they can use. At meals, you are noticed. Do you eat like someone starving? Do you hold yourself like you belong? Do you listen? Do you interrupt? If you throw a tantrum, it's not only annoying, it's information. If you break something, it's not only a child's accident. It's a little omen about your temperament. The heroic world is full of signs because people are always searching for certainty. Your elders want to know whether you will bring honor to the house or bring chaos. So they correct you early. Not gently. Not cruelly either. Just firmly, the way you correct a young horse. Because that is what you are, in their eyes. A future asset that must be made usable. By the time you're old enough to run without being chased back inside, the physical training begins. Not in a school. Not in a neat system. It's more practical than that. Your world is full of adults doing hard labor, and you copy what you see. You wrestle with other boys. You race on rough ground. You climb. You throw stones. You learn how to fall and not cry, because crying draws mockery, and mockery is how older boys establish rank. If your household is wealthy, you also learn skills that signal class. You learn to handle horses, to mount without looking awkward, to keep your balance, to calm an animal that could crush you if it panics. You learn to run in armor, even if it's only a small piece at first. A helmet placed on your head so you can feel its weight. A shield held up until your shoulder burns. A spear shaft that's too long for you now, so you can grow into it. People sometimes imagine Bronze Age fighting as constant sword duels. But a hero's main relationship is usually with a spear. A spear is distance. A spear is reach. A spear lets you be deadly without being swallowed by the mess of bodies. So you practice with it. You practice throwing. You practice holding the line. You practice stepping in and out without tripping. Not because it looks impressive. Because someday you'll be expected to do it, while men scream and the ground is slick. One of the cleanest ways to teach a young noble to face danger is to take him hunting. Hunting is not only about meat. It's about rehearsal. It's about forcing your body to learn what it feels like to chase something that can hurt you back. Deer hunts teach stamina. They teach tracking. They teach patience. Boar hunts teach courage in a more direct way. A boar is not a noble, quiet animal. A boar is fast and angry. It can rip a dog open. It can slash a leg. It can turn suddenly, forcing you to decide whether you freeze or strike. In Mycenaean art, hunting scenes show men with throwing spears chasing deer and boar, and that kind of imagery isn't random decoration. It's a brag. It's a statement about what the elite believe makes them elite. Because if you can face a boar and keep your nerve, you might keep your nerve when a rival's warband lands on your shore. In some places, hunting is also tied to prestige items. Boar tusks are used in famous helmets. That means the act of hunting can literally become part of your war gear. You kill the animal, you take the tusk, you wear the proof. And the proof tells everyone this person belongs to the kind of life where danger is normal. A hero is not only trained to fight, he's trained to lead. And leadership in this culture is not silent, it's performed. In the later heroic poems, there's a famous phrase about a good leader being both a speaker of words and a doer of deeds. That idea is older than the poems themselves. Even in palatial society, the ability to speak in a hall matters. So you learn how to talk, not like a child, like someone whose words can settle arguments, like someone who can defend his own honor without turning a feast into a bloodbath. You learn when to flatter, when to threaten, when to pretend you didn't hear an insult, when to answer directly so nobody mistakes your restraint for fear. Older men test you with small humiliations, a joke at your expense, a cup offered and then pulled back, a command given sharply in front of others. If you handle it well, they nod. If you handle it badly, they smile. Not because they hate you, because they are learning what you are. Not every noble child is raised only at home. Sometimes a boy is sent to another household to be raised for a while. Part of that is training. Part of it is politics. If two leaders want to strengthen their bond, they exchange what matters most. Not gold, not cattle, children. A fostered child becomes a living treaty. As long as he is safe and respected, the relationship between houses stays warm. Mistreat him, and you invite war. This is one reason heroic stories love mentors. A mentor is not only a teacher. A mentor is an anchor, a second father, a person who can speak to you with authority when your real father is too busy managing the kingdom. In the traditions around Achilles, for example, Phoenix is remembered as a tutor figure within Peleus's household, the older man who helped raise the young warrior. Whether you treat that as literal history or poetic memory, the social pattern behind it is believable. Elite boys often learn leadership from seasoned older men who are close to the household but not the household head. Mentorship also solves a practical problem. A king has enemies. If his son is always beside him, the son is always exposed. Send the son away to be trained, and you reduce the risk. At the same time, you expand the son's network. He grows up with friends and rivals in another court. He learns other customs. He learns how to read a room that is not loyal to him by default. That is priceless training. If you listen to later stories, you'll also hear a more dramatic version of the mentor idea, the hero raised outside normal society. Achilles with Chiron, Jason with Chiron. Other young figures brought to a wise teacher who lives on a mountain. The details vary depending on which source you follow, but the theme is steady. The hero is made exceptional by being taught beyond ordinary limits. Medicine, hunting, music, archery, herbs, discipline. Whether or not a real Bronze Age prince ever learned medicine from a centaur is not the point. The point is what the story is saying. A hero's education is supposed to be complete, not just strong, capable, versatile, able to survive, able to heal, able to speak, able to kill. It's the fantasy version of the same practical truth. Leaders who travel and fight need broad skills, and households invest heavily in creating that kind of person. Another thing heroic tradition keeps circling is the pair. Two young men raised close. Companions. Brothers in arms. Sometimes actual relatives. Sometimes not. The relationship between Achilles and Patroclus is the most famous example from the Trojan story world, but the pattern appears everywhere in heroic society. A leader needs someone he trusts, someone who can manage men, someone who can speak for him when he's not present, someone who can tell him the truth when everyone else is flattering. So companionship is cultivated. Young elites grow up competing, yes, but they also grow up bonding, training together, hunting together, serving at feasts together, sharing small risks that become loyalty later. Because when war comes, your closest friend may be the difference between survival and a funeral mound. And before Troy, war is already part of the landscape. Not the giant coalition war yet, but raids, feuds, coastal skirmishes, border fights. This is where companions are tested. not in grand speeches. In moments where you're outnumbered and someone has to choose whether to stand with you or run. A young noble does not wait until he is a grown man to learn violence. He sees it early. He hears the stories. He watches the injured come home. He sees a man limping and hears how the limp was earned. He sees a woman crying and learns that crying can mean widowhood. And eventually he participates. At first, it might be something small, guard duty, a patrol, standing on a wall and scanning the sea until your eyes hurt. Then something sharper, a raid against a rival's herd, a night march to surprise a small group, a scuffle that turns into a killing because nobody wants to lose face. The point is not that every young hero becomes a murderer at 13. The point is that violence is close enough to be normal. A hero learns early that the world can switch from feast to blood very quickly, and that knowledge hardens him. It also teaches him caution. Because the heroic code isn't just about courage. It's also about timing, when to fight, when to hold back, when to accept compensation, when to demand it, when to forgive, when forgiving would look like weakness. These are not abstract moral questions. They are survival calculations. Heroic stories are obsessed with male glory, but heroic households are held together by women's work. If you are a high-status girl, your life is also political. Your education is not built around spears, but around power that moves quietly. You learn weaving and textile work because cloth is wealth. Cloth is trade. Cloth is gift. Cloth is status. A beautifully made robe is not a hobby project. It's a statement. It says your household has skill. It says your household has time and labor to spare. You also learn household management, how to supervise servants, how to store food, how to host, how to receive guests without revealing fear, how to keep secrets. In a palatial setting, women can have real influence over ritual and over the internal economy of the household, even when men are the ones who speak publicly. And marriages are not love stories first. They are alliances. A high-status girl is raised with the knowledge that her marriage may tie two kingdoms together or keep two war bands from tearing each other apart. That means her training includes social discipline, reading people, saying the right thing, maintaining dignity under pressure. Because if a marriage alliance fails, it can fail loudly, and it can fail violently. By now you've seen that this world is saturated with the divine, not in constant miracles, in constant awareness. Children learn that awareness early. They watch sacrifices. They learn the names of local gods and powers. They learn what their household is known for religiously, which shrine they favor, which deity they blame when things go wrong. They learn that oaths are not just promises. They are dangerous. They learn that some places are hot spiritually. A spring, a cave, a mountaintop, a grove, a tomb. They learn to be careful with words in those places. That caution becomes part of a hero's mental training. Because a hero who thinks he's above the gods usually ends up as a warning story. And every household knows those warning stories. Before you can win glory in war, you win it in smaller arenas. Running races, wrestling, throwing, playing rough games where older boys test you. In the later epic tradition, athletic competition is a way a man proves his status. A hero who refuses games looks suspicious, like he's hiding weakness. That attitude likely reflects something older. Elite men signal excellence through public performance. So you compete. And competition is not always friendly. A rival might trip you. Someone might mock your technique. Someone might laugh when you lose. The point is not the cruelty. The point is the social lesson. You learn to lose without collapsing. You learn to win without making enemies you can't afford. You learn how quickly people attach your performance to your worth. And you learn how badly you want them to stop talking. That desire becomes fuel. It pushes you to train, to harden, to become the kind of young man who can walk into a hall and make people quiet down. A hero's temper is part of his reputation. If you are too soft, you will be used. If you are too wild, you will be isolated. So the ideal is controlled danger. A man who can be gentle when it benefits him. A man who can become lethal when he has to. This is why elders watch your reactions. A servant spills wine. Do you laugh or do you lash out? A guest teases you. Do you explode or do you respond with a sharper joke? A rival's son pushes you. Do you start a fight in the middle of a feast, embarrassing your father? Or do you wait until later, when the lesson can be delivered quietly? That waiting is not cowardice. It's strategy. And a hero is expected to learn strategy. Not the abstract kind, the human kind. Here is the pressure that sits under all the training. A young noble hears stories. He hears of men who fought well, men who were praised, men who were remembered. And he also hears of men who were ignored, men who lived and died and left nothing behind except children and chores. For most people, that kind of life is normal. For a hero in training, it feels like failure, not because ordinary people are worthless, because the heroic class is raised to believe that they must be exceptional. They must expand the house. They must protect it. They must add to its reputation. If they don't, the house shrinks. Allies drift. Rivals grow bold. Servants whisper. And eventually someone stronger takes what you have. So when you see a young hero pushing himself beyond comfort, it's not just testosterone. It's fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being laughed at. Fear of failing the name he inherited. That fear is the engine. It's what turns training into obsession. It's what turns a boy into someone who can stand in front of armed men and say, "Follow me," and have them actually do it. Even before the Trojan call goes out, elite boys learn that their world is bigger than their own walls. They travel with older men. They accompany envoys. They visit allied courts. They see other styles of feasting, other weapons, other dialects of Greek, other shrines, other ways of doing things. They learn that status changes with place. At home, you might be the prince. In another court, you are a guest. And as a guest, you are protected, but you are also measured. People decide whether you carry yourself like a future leader or like a spoiled child. That evaluation follows you. News travels. Stories travel. Even small mistakes can be repeated and sharpened by gossip. So your education is not only training in weapons and speech. It's training in being observed, in behaving as if your name is already bigger than you are. Because in the heroic world, it often is. And as we move forward, that education becomes the foundation for everything that happens next. Because when the oath that binds Greek leaders finally begins to tighten, the men who answer the call will not be ordinary soldiers. They will be the product of this long shaping. Boys trained into warriors. Boys trained into politicians. Boys trained into legends. Before Troy ever appears on the horizon, the making of the heroes is already underway. Your household is your kingdom. A hero's life looks loud from the outside. Ships, spears, feasts, challenges. But most days, your power is quieter. It lives in walls, in doors that can be barred, in rooms that only certain people can enter, in jars sealed with clay, in lists scratched into damp tablets, in the simple fact that when you speak, other people stop what they're doing. That's what household means here, not just family. A whole machine. And if you are born into the heroic class, you are raised to become one of its moving parts, the piece that faces outward. The hand that holds the spear, yes, but also the hand that takes gifts, gives gifts, and keeps the right people close. The household you belong to is likely built around a citadel or palace complex, because the elite of this era prefer high ground, thick stone, and a view that makes approach difficult. It is not a mansion the way we imagine mansions. It is part fortress, part warehouse, part workshop, part stage. If you walk through the main gate in the morning, you move through layers. Not just architecture, authority. The outer areas are full of activity that looks ordinary, even if it's controlled. Women moving water, men carrying bundles, animals being herded, a guard shifting his weight, bored until he isn't, a runner arriving with dust on his shins. Somewhere nearby, the sound of pounding metal starts early, because bronze work is never just a hobby. If you want weapons and armor that don't fail, someone has to spend hours coaxing them into shape. And then you reach the spaces where the household becomes something else. Storerooms, sealed doors, narrow corridors where the air smells like oil and grain and old clay. If you are used to modern money, this is the first big adjustment. Most wealth here is not coins. It is stuff. Stuff that feeds people. Stuff that makes people owe you. Stuff that can be moved. Stuff that can be counted. In palatial centers, counting is serious business. Clay tablets written in Linear B are not literature. They are administration, records of goods, people, and obligations, made for practical use and kept in palace archives. The writing survives to us largely because many tablet collections were fired hard when buildings burned, turning soft clay into something that lasts. In the moment, though, the tablets are everyday tools. A quick transaction, a list, a summary, a reminder of who delivered what. A way to keep control without needing a guard standing over every jar. So when you imagine your household, imagine not just warriors in gold. Imagine scribes, quiet men with trained hands. Men whose status may not look like yours, but whose knowledge gives them access to power. They know which storeroom holds the best oil. They know who has been shorting the palace and their deliveries. They know how many sheep have been counted, how much wool is expected, how much cloth is being produced. And if you are the kind of young hero who thinks only a spear matters, you learn quickly that numbers can start fights. Because when a household is strong, it's not only because its men are brave. It is because its resources move where the ruler wants them to move. A hero is part of that system. You may not personally tally jars, but you will benefit from what the tallies create. When your household sends you out with a war band, it can do that because the storerooms are full. When your household hosts a feast, it can do that because the storerooms are full. When your household gives a guest a bronze cup and a cloak, it can do that because the workshops and herds and fields have been managed. In other words, the loud hero life rests on quiet infrastructure. The center of your household's public life is the Great Hall, a long room designed for presence. In Mycenaean palaces, this hall is the kind later scholars call a megaron, a large central space with a round hearth in the middle, often surrounded by columns, with an opening above for smoke to escape. That hearth is practical, yes, but it also does something symbolic. It makes the hall feel like a single body, everyone facing inward. Everyone aware of where the center is, and everyone aware of who sits in the most important place. In your world, authority is visible. The seat of the ruler is not hidden behind layers of bureaucracy. It is shown. A place where you can see who is allowed close and who is kept at a distance. Who eats the best cut? Who receives the first cup? Who speaks and who must wait? If you belong to this household by blood, you learn these details the way you learn weather. You stop noticing the smell of smoke. You stop noticing the clink of cups. But you never stop noticing who is honored. Because honor inside the household is distribution, not just of food, of attention, of proximity. A hero's upbringing includes learning the geography of a room, where you stand, where you sit, how close you can get to the ruler without looking hungry, how close you can get to a powerful guest without making it look like you're begging. These are small skills. They are also survival skills. Now step away from the hall for a moment and go back toward the storerooms. Because the storerooms are where a household becomes a kingdom. Rows of jars, large containers for oil and wine, grain measured and stored, textiles folded and stacked, metal kept under watch. Even if you don't have a detailed inventory in your head, you learn to feel the difference between plenty and strain. In a year of plenty, the household is generous. Feasts are bigger. Gifts are smoother. The guards are paid. The craftsmen are busy. There is more laughter. In a year of strain, everything tightens. Rations, tempers, promises. A scribe's tablet becomes sharper because shortages need explanations. And explanations can turn into blame. This is where heroic life gets complicated. Because as an elite warrior, you are supposed to look confident. But you also live under the knowledge that power can crack. A bad harvest. A disease among animals. A ship lost. A rival rising. A fire. A single betrayal. Any of these can start a chain reaction. So a good household head spends his life preventing chains, and the hero-class son spends his life learning how. The ruler of your household might be called the Wanax in the administrative language that survives on some tablets, a title that suggests a top authority at the palatial level. Around him are other powerful figures, leaders and officials who manage parts of the machine. For you, what matters is the lived truth. The household has layers. Not everyone can speak freely. Not everyone can walk where they want. A servant carrying water can move through many rooms because the work demands it, but that does not mean the servant has power. A scribe can walk into a storeroom and record what is there, because the household trusts the scribe's role, but that does not mean the scribe outranks the warrior. A captain of men may have influence far beyond his birth rank, because men trust him in danger. And a queen or high-status woman can have influence that never appears as a shouted command, because she controls access, ritual obligations, and internal networks of loyalty. This is one of the easiest parts of heroic society to misunderstand. Power is not one thing. It is several things stacked. If you want to see that stack, watch what happens when a guest arrives. A guest is a stress test. The household has to show itself. Food must appear. A place to sit must be offered. Gifts must be prepared. Servants must be directed. Guards must be polite and alert at the same time. And the hero-class members of the house must manage the social side. Not by smiling. By reading. A guest can be an ally. A guest can be an enemy. A guest can be both, depending on what the next year brings. So you learn to listen. What does he praise? What does he avoid? What does he ask for directly? What does he hint at? What does he notice in your hall? The quality of your cups, the number of dogs, the condition of your horses, the polish of your spearheads, the size of your storerooms. All of it is information. And because your world runs on reputation, information becomes leverage. That's why households guard their image. It is not vanity. It is defense. A hero is part of that defense, and not only in battle. If you insult a guest, you might start a feud. If you fail to honor a guest, you might look weak. If you give too little, you look poor. If you give too much, you look desperate or foolish. There is an art to generosity. A gift must feel effortless. It must look like the household can keep giving forever, even if it can't. This is why the best gifts are often things that speak. A finely made cup, a cloak woven with care, a piece of armor, a weapon that looks like it belongs in a story, a chariot, a horse. These are not just objects. They are messages. They say, our household has skill. Our household has resources. Our household has people who can make things. Our household can take you in, or crush you. And behind these messages are the workshops. If you spend time near the workshops, you see the empire beneath the hero. Textile production, in particular, is not background noise. It is one of the main engines of elite wealth. Wool is gathered. Flax is processed. Threads are spun. Cloth is woven. Dyes are used when available. Finished textiles become clothing, gifts, trade goods, and sometimes a kind of currency in practice because cloth is portable value. In the palatial world, textiles can be controlled and organized on a large scale. So when you see a beautifully made robe at a feast, you are not only seeing beauty, you are seeing administration, labor, storage, and the quiet authority of the people, often women, who supervise that production. Perfumed oil is another kind of elite power. Oil itself is already valuable. It can be eaten, used in ritual, used on the body, used in lamps. When it is perfumed, it becomes prestige, a smell that marks you as someone with access, someone who is not struggling, someone who can afford to carry luxury on their skin. In some palatial systems, perfumed oils and textiles appear as industries that authorities control closely because they are high-value goods that can be used to reward loyalty and impress outsiders. Chariots, too, live in this category. Not because every battle is fought from a chariot, because a chariot is expensive. It requires wood, leather, metal fittings. It requires skilled labor. It requires horses. It requires maintenance. It is the kind of thing that only a powerful household can keep functional. So even when a chariot is not practical for every terrain, it remains a sign of status. A mobile announcement. A hero who can ride in one is telling the world, my house is big enough to support this kind of life. And that, again, circles back to the palace. Because the palace is where these industries are coordinated, where supplies are gathered, where products are stored, where distribution happens. If you are a hero living under this roof, you grow up understanding distribution as the real spine of authority. A leader keeps men by feeding men, not only with food, with gifts, with praise, with positions, with public honor. A household is full of people who want something. A guard wants steady rations. A craftsman wants protection and materials. A farmer wants fairness, or at least predictability. A minor noble wants recognition. A rival wants a mistake. So your household head distributes. And by distributing, he creates obligation. You might hear later Greeks talk about guest friendship as if it is a gentle moral code. In the Bronze Age elite world, it is also a mechanism. If you have accepted gifts in a hall, you are tied to that hall. If you have eaten at that hearth, it is harder to treat that household as a stranger. Harder, not impossible. But the tie is real. And heroes are trained to build ties before they need them. This is why marriages matter so much. A marriage is not a private romance first. It is a household decision, a permanent link. When a hero marries, he is often marrying the household, not only the person. He is gaining allies. He is calming borders. He is acquiring claim. He is sometimes taking responsibility for land, for people, for obligations that come with the match. If you are the spouse being married into the house, your life changes completely. You are brought into a machine. You are expected to produce heirs, to manage internal networks, to host, to protect the household's reputation. And if you are a woman in the elite world, your position can be both vulnerable and powerful. Vulnerable because men fight over households. Powerful because households run on internal management, and much of that management is invisible until it fails. If you want to understand heroic life, you have to understand that heroes do not fight alone. They fight back by labor, by storage, by craft, by ritual, by kin, by a whole community that depends on the household staying intact. That community is not always happy. People can resent the elite. They can whisper. They can hide goods. They can run. They can fail to show up when called. So a good household also governs. Disputes are handled. Punishments exist. Compensation is demanded. Sometimes violence is used to enforce order. And the hero class grows up watching all of this. Not as an outsider. As someone who will one day be expected to take responsibility for it. This is where the heroic image becomes dangerous. Because a young man might think hero life is glory. But inside the household, glory is a tool used to keep things from falling apart. A public feast reminds everyone who is in charge. A gift to a minor leader keeps him loyal. A marriage alliance buys peace. A raid reminds a neighbor to stay cautious. Even a funeral becomes politics. Who shows up? Who brings what? Who speaks? Who claims closeness to the dead? All of it is the household announcing itself. And you, as a hero, are one of the household's loudest announcements. You are trained to look like certainty, to look like stability, to look like the kind of person who can lead men into danger and bring them home. But that image is built on constant management. Sometimes that management is harsh, because the palatial world is not a place where everyone's comfort is the top priority. It is a place where continuity is the top priority. The household must survive. The line must continue. The storerooms must remain full. The alliances must hold. If any of those fail, the hero loses his stage. His weapons still exist. His strength still exists. But without a household behind him, he becomes something else. A wandering warrior. A mercenary. A man with a name that used to mean something. That fear sits under elite life. It shapes how people act in the hall. Why they care so much about gifts. Why they obsess over slights. Why they guard the storerooms. Why they keep scribes. Why they invest in industries like textiles and perfumed oils and chariots. Because all of these are ways of keeping the household's reputation heavy. And if your reputation is heavy, fewer people try to lift it and steal what's under it. So before Troy, while songs may focus on youthful strength, your real daily world is this. A fortress full of people. A warehouse full of value. A hall full of watching eyes. A network of alliances held together by food, cloth, metal, and promise. And a young hero learning, one day at a time, that power is not only won with a spear. It is stored. It is counted. It is displayed. It is given away in exactly the right amounts. It is protected. And sometimes it is rebuilt from ash. Because in this era, palaces burned. Kingdoms collapse, and the men who survive are the ones whose households were more than stone. They were relationships. They were systems. They were loyalty. And those are harder to destroy than walls. A hero can win a fight on the shore and still lose his standing in the hall. That's the trick of life before Troy. Violence matters, but food is where loyalty is built. When people picture a Bronze Age Greek feast, they usually picture noise and laughter and a lot of meat. That part is real. But the feast is also a system. It's a public scoreboard. It's the place where your household proves it can feed people, protect people, and reward people. And if you're the kind of hero who thinks the real action starts only when spears come out, you learn fast that the table can be sharper than any blade. You feel it the moment you step into the hall. The air is warm from the central hearth. Smoke clings to the ceiling and to hair and clothing. Firelight makes bronze and polished wood look richer than they are. Dogs drift along the edges, hoping for bones. Servants move in practiced paths, quiet and quick, careful not to draw attention. People are already doing math, not numbers on a tablet. Social math. Who arrived? Who was invited? Who wasn't? Who is seated close? Who is seated far? Who is standing because there isn't a place? If you're young, you learn this without anyone explaining it. A man placed near the household head is being honored. A man placed far away is being tolerated. A man placed in a corner is being warned. And if the seating is accidental, everyone understands that it isn't. A feast begins before anyone eats. It begins with how the host receives you. A good host doesn't interrogate you at the door. You're fed first because feeding is protection and respect, and because refusing to feed a visitor risks shame and divine anger. Later Greek stories frame this as xenia, the sacred duty of host and guest, but the roots of the behavior are older than those poems. Strangers are a threat and an opportunity at the same time, so the safest approach is ritualized generosity. You're offered water. Your hands are cleaned. Sometimes your feet are washed. You're given a place. Then you're asked who you are and why you've come. That order matters. It tells the guest, you are safe here. It also tells the room, our household is confident enough to be generous before it gathers information. The food itself is familiar to you in a way that would surprise a modern person. Bread is the backbone. Usually barley bread for most people, wheat bread when a household can afford it, and often a mix depending on the year and the region. You eat olives when you have them. You eat cheese when there's milk. You eat onions, herbs, and whatever fruit is in season. You eat fish when you live near the coast or have access to traders. Meat exists, but it's not something that appears every night for everyone. In a major feast, though, meat becomes the main performance. Not because everyone is starving, because meat signals control. It says, our herds are healthy. Our hunters and herdsmen are doing their jobs. Our storerooms are full enough that we can slaughter animals and not panic. And if the meat is tied to sacrifice, it also says, the gods are being honored through this household. That matters. A palatial household wants to look favored. If people believe the gods listen to your oaths, your threats become heavier. Now pay attention to the cuts. This is where the feast turns into politics. Someone decides who gets the best portion. The best portion is not a random bite. It's a signal. It might be the fattest slice. It might be a special piece set aside for honor. The later epics are obsessed with this kind of thing, and for a reason. A leader uses meat the way he uses gifts. He gives it to build loyalty. He withholds it to discipline. He redirects it to start an argument if he wants to expose a rival's temper. If you are honored publicly with a prime cut, people notice. If you aren't, people also notice. And the dangerous part is that you don't get to pretend you didn't notice. A hero's face is part of the meal. If you smile, you might look weak. If you glare, you might look childish. If you complain, you might look greedy. So you learn to accept what you're given and let your reaction do exactly what you need it to do. This is why older men watch younger men at feasts. Not because they're curious about appetite, because they're curious about control. A feast also has its own rhythm of sound. The crackle of wood, the scrape of bowls, the thump of a cup set down hard after a sharp joke, laughter that comes a little too fast, a singer's voice rising, and under it all, the low hum of a room full of people measuring one another. If you are a hero, you are expected to be good at this. You are expected to hold your drink. You are expected to speak well. You are expected to listen more than you talk when it benefits you. And you are expected to give the right impression to the right person. Because the hall is where alliances are made. A marriage is negotiated between cups. A dispute is softened with food. An insult is forgiven in public so it doesn't grow into a feud. A rival is tested with a compliment that is also a trap. The wine makes this easier and more dangerous at the same time. Wine is common enough to be normal, but not so common that it becomes meaningless. It is stored, measured, mixed, served. It turns a feast into a controlled storm. In later Greek practice, wine is diluted with water and mixed in a large vessel called a crater, and that mixing becomes a symbol of civilized drinking. Evidence from late Bronze Age and early post-palatial contexts shows the same kind of wine equipment in use. Containers for transport, basins for carrying water, craters for mixing, jugs for pouring, and cups for drinking. In a palace setting, the equipment itself can be a display of order. The mixing bowl is the center of the social flow. Who controls it controls the pace. Serve too fast, and you get chaos. Serve too slow, and you signal stinginess. Serve the wrong person first, and you start a quiet war. So the host or his trusted people manage the drink like they manage everything else, as distribution. This is one reason archaeologists pay so much attention to drinking sets found in palatial rooms. A room full of hundreds of drinking vessels is not just a party closet. It suggests organized events, repeated events, events big enough that equipment had to be stored and managed. And it matches what the administrative records hint at: palaces, tracked vessels, commodities, and allocations. That combination is important. It tells you that feasting isn't merely a private dinner. It is part of how the elite make society run. You can feel the hierarchy in the way the cups move. The top man receives his cup with a certain ceremony. A trusted guest receives his cup quickly. A tolerated guest receives his cup late. A dependent receives his cup when he is allowed, if he is allowed. And young men like you learn the trick of pretending the order doesn't matter while storing every detail. Because you will need those details later. When you are asked to choose sides. When you are asked to send men. When you are asked to support an oath. When you are asked to marry into someone's line. Now step outside the hall for a moment and follow the food backward. A feast looks effortless only if the household is well run. Someone has slaughtered animals. Someone has salted meat and managed storage. Someone has gathered grain. Someone has pressed oil. Someone has collected honey. Someone has brewed or stored wine. Someone has made sure there are enough bowls and cups and serving pieces. Someone has kept the hearth ready. And someone has coordinated labor so the household can do all of this without collapsing. That coordination is power. It's also a warning. If your household can host a feast for dozens or more, it can also mobilize. It can feed men away from home. It can support a journey. It can sustain a warband. This is why feasts become a kind of rehearsal for war. Not the fighting. The logistics. The ability to gather people, keep them satisfied, and send them away with a sense of obligation. That last part matters most. A guest leaving your hall often leaves with a gift. A cup, a cloak, a piece of armor, a promise of help. The gift is polite. It is also a hook. The person who accepts it carries your household's influence home with him. And if he shows the gift to others, your influence spreads. This is how reputations become real. It is not only stories. It is evidence that can be held. You might see a guest examine a cup closely, run a thumb along the rim, test the weight, admire the craftsmanship. He is not only enjoying it, he is evaluating your household's reach. Who made this? Who supplied the metal? How far does this household's network extend? Who else has received gifts like this? A feast is full of this kind of silent questioning. And the host answers without giving a speech. He answers by being generous at exactly the right volume. One of the deepest patterns in heroic life is that generosity must be seen. A secret gift is useful. A public gift is power. Public gifts tell everyone in the hall that the host is the kind of person who can reward loyalty. They also tell everyone who didn't receive a gift that they are less valued. That creates pressure. Pressure is a tool. A young hero learns to use it. He also learns to survive it, because feasts are where a man can be boxed in. If a powerful leader wants to test you, he might honor you. That sounds pleasant, but honor can be a trap. If you're given a prime cut and a fine cup, you are being invited into a relationship. If you accept it warmly, you are signaling willingness. If you accept it coldly, you are insulting the host. If you refuse it, you are rejecting a public bond. Any choice has consequences. So you learn the safe language of thanks. You learn to praise the gift without looking like you need it. You learn to praise the host without bowing. You learn to take honor as if you were born with it. And if you're smart, you also learn to share honor. You pass food to a younger companion. You invite someone lower in status to drink with you when it won't offend the host. You create your own small circle of loyalty inside the larger circle. Because one day you will host. And the men who remember you feeding them will be the men who show up when you call. Now think about the people who do not get to sit close. Many men in the hall are there because they matter. Others are there because their labor matters, and the household needs them to feel included enough to stay cooperative. In the palatial world, food distribution and rationing appear in the administrative record, which means that even outside great feasts, the palace is constantly deciding who receives what. A feast is the glamorous edge of a much larger system. It's the moment where the same mechanism becomes visible. That visibility is not accidental. When people see the household feeding many mouths, they begin to believe in its future. Belief becomes compliance. Compliance becomes stability. And stability becomes the room a hero needs in order to chase fame beyond his walls. This is also why feasts can become tense when resources are tight. If the year has been rough, the host still has to look generous. He can't reveal fear. So he stages plenty. Maybe not as much as before, but enough. Enough that people can't point and say the household is weakening. Because once people start saying that, you invite attack. Feasting, then, becomes a kind of armor. An edible shield. A night where your household shows its thickness. And you, as a hero, are part of the show. You're expected to behave as if your house has endless depth. You're expected to praise the host when you should. You're expected to keep your temper when a rival pushes you with a joke. You're expected to make your own jokes without stepping over a line. You're expected to remember every face. and you are expected to leave the hall with your name heavier than when you entered. Sometimes, that heaviness comes from a fight. More often, before Troy, it comes from a table, from the way you handled honor, from the way you handled insult, from the way you ate and drank like someone who belongs among kings. And when you finally step back out into the night air, the smell of smoke stays on you. It clings to your hair. It clings to your cloak. It clings to your reputation too. Because the next day, people will talk. They will talk about who received the best seat, who received the best meat, who drank too much, who spoke well, who looked small, who looked dangerous. And in a world where a hero's life is measured by public memory, that talk matters. It matters enough that whole alliances can start as a friendly cup offered at the right moment. And whole wars can begin when a cup is offered late. A hero in your world is not defined by a crown. He's defined by what he can carry, what he can afford, what he can keep in working condition, and what he can do with it when everything turns loud. In later stories, armor shines like it was made for a parade. In real life, it squeaks. It pinches. It rubs skin raw. It makes your sweat feel like it's trapped under metal. And if it doesn't fit you well, it can get you killed. Before Troy, this is the equipment reality behind the reputation. Your household storerooms and workshops don't just create wealth, they create survivability. Because the difference between a rich hero and a poor fighting man is not courage. It's protection. It's better weapons. It's spare gear. It's people who can repair what breaks. It's a horse that can carry you out of trouble. And it's the simple fact that your family can afford to lose you for weeks on a campaign and not starve. Start with the basics. Most of the time, your closest relationship is with a spear. A spear is practical. A spear keeps an enemy at distance. A spear is also cheap compared to a sword, because a spear is mostly wood. The metal is concentrated at the tip. That means more men can be armed with spears than with swords, and a leader who wants a reliable group cares about that. A hero will often carry more than one. A heavier spear for close work, a lighter one that can be thrown, and on a bad day, a spear can break. Wood snaps. A shaft splits. Someone steps on it in the crush. So the habit you develop is simple. Never trust that one weapon will last. You learn to improvise. You learn to take what's on the ground. You learn to use a broken spear like a short staff. You learn to close the distance with a knife if you have to. That's why a dagger matters. Daggers are small, but they're a last truth. If you lose the long weapon, you still have something. Now the sword. In the heroic imagination, swords carry a special kind of prestige. They're personal. They're close. They're the weapon that makes a duel feel like a story. But in a practical sense, a sword is a backup for many fighters. It's what you draw when the spear is gone or the space is too tight. Swords are also expensive. They require more metal, more skilled work. And in a bronze economy, that matters. So if you wear a good sword, you are wearing a message. Your household is strong. Your household is connected. Your household can afford to put metal into something that isn't just a spearhead. There are other weapons too. Bows exist, and archery is part of the landscape, but the heroic social ideal often centers more on the close fighter. That doesn't mean archers aren't valued. It means prestige often sticks to the man who stands in front. If you're an elite warrior, you might still use a bow, but you're likely trained to be comfortable in the ugly range. The range where you can smell another man's breath. The range where you hear his armor. The range where courage is impossible to fake. Now the shield. If you want one piece of gear that changes how you live, it's the shield. A shield is weight. A shield is fatigue. A shield is confidence. It's also identity. because a shield is visible. It tells people how serious you are. And in this era, shields vary. Some are simple. Some are large. Some are shaped to cover more of the body. Some are built for speed. Whatever shape it is, the habit is the same. You learn to live behind it. You learn to angle it. You learn to use it as a moving wall. You learn that your shield arm gets tired before your legs do. You learn that when your shield drops, your world gets dangerous instantly. So you train your shoulder. You train your grip. You train the endurance that looks boring until it saves you. Armor comes next. Not everyone has full armor. Many men fight in simple protection or none at all. A helmet, if they can get one. A thick tunic. A leather piece. But the elite can afford more. Bronze plates. Bronze greaves to protect the shins. A breastplate or a layered system. And the more armor you wear, the more you realize the trade. More protection means less speed, less freedom, more heat, more exhaustion. So the skill isn't only owning armor, it's learning how to fight while wearing it. That training starts in small doses. A young hero tries on a helmet and learns how sound changes. Everything becomes louder inside your own head. You hear your breathing. You hear your heartbeat. The world outside becomes more distant. Your vision narrows. You learn to turn your whole body to see. You learn not to panic when you can't hear clearly. Then you add the rest. Greaves that pinch your calves. A chest piece that rubs. Straps that dig into your skin. And you learn where blisters form. You learn which leather needs softening. You learn that if something is uncomfortable at the start, it becomes torture after a few hours. So you adjust. You have people adjust it. Because a hero isn't just a man with gear. He's a man with support. Someone is oiling the leather. Someone is hammering out a dent. Someone is replacing a strap. Someone is stitching. Someone is sharpening. If you don't have those people, your gear becomes a pile of mistakes. That's another thing later stories don't emphasize. The hero is rarely alone. There are always hands behind the famous hands. Now talk about chariots. A chariot in this world is a status object first. A rolling announcement. It's expensive. It needs horses. It needs skilled maintenance. It needs roads or open ground where it can move. So its usefulness depends on where you are. In some places, chariots are practical for moving elite fighters quickly, for skirmishing, for turning a battlefield into a series of fast strikes. In other places, they're hard to use. Rocky ground, steep hills, narrow passes. If you try to run a chariot there, you're basically dragging a liability. But even when chariots aren't used constantly in combat, they still matter socially. If you can field a chariot, you're not just a fighter. You're a household with resources. So a young hero is trained around them. He learns to handle horses, to ride, to keep calm when an animal that outweighs him gets nervous. He learns that horses smell fear. He learns that a panicked horse can kill you accidentally. So he becomes the kind of person who can make other living things obey. That's part of being hero-shaped, too. Now the body. A lot of modern talk about warriors imagines a clean gym body. Bronze Age strength is different. It's functional. Its shoulders built from holding weight. Its forearms built from gripping. Its legs built from uneven ground. Its endurance built from hunger and long walks. Most of your training happens in real life. Climbing, running, wrestling, hunting, carrying gear. And if you're elite, the training is guided. Older men correct your stance. They teach you how to use your hips so you don't tire too fast. They teach you how to hold a spear so you can strike without losing balance. They teach you not to waste energy. Because a battle is not a sprint. It's chaos that lasts. And the man who burns himself out early becomes easy prey. Pain is normal. So are scars. Before Troy, even if you haven't fought in a major war, you likely have small injuries. Cuts, bruises, a twisted ankle, a shoulder that aches from wrestling, a tooth that cracked, a scar from a boar hunt. These aren't just marks. They're proof. In heroic culture, proof matters. People believe what they can see. But the body also has limits. Injuries that heal badly can take a man out of his best years. Infection is a quiet killer. A cut is not just a cut. If it gets dirty and swells and rots, it can kill you long after the fight ends. So medicine exists, but it's a mix of practical knowledge and ritual. Washing wounds, using herbs, bandaging, praying, and sometimes just waiting to see whether the body chooses to live. If you're high status, you have access to more care, more hands, cleaner water, better bandages, someone who has seen wounds before. That's another unfair advantage. Not just armor, aftercare. Now, how do fights actually happen before Troy? Not every conflict is a set-piece battle with two armies lined up neatly. A lot of conflict is small. Raids, ambushes, skirmishes, coastal attacks, feud violence, a fight over animals, a fight over a boundary, a fight because someone insulted someone and nobody wants to be the one who backs down. In those fights, numbers matter. Surprise matters. Speed matters. And leadership matters. Because men do not behave the same when they feel watched by someone they respect. A young hero learns battlefield habits that look simple but take years. He learns to keep a group together, not by shouting constantly, by moving confidently, by taking the front at the right moment, by not running when things feel uncertain. He learns to listen, not to speeches, to the sound of the fight. The moment the enemy's rhythm changes, the moment your own men start to waver, the moment a small retreat is smart versus the moment a retreat becomes a rout. A rout is the nightmare. Because when a group breaks, that's when most of the killing happens. Not during the proud clash. During the running. During the turning of backs. During the panic. So a hero learns to prevent panic by projecting control, even when he doesn't feel it. That's a repeated theme of heroic life. You don't have to be fearless. You have to look steady. Now the duel. The heroic world loves the duel. Two named men stepping forward. A contest of skill and courage. The reason is obvious. A duel creates story. It creates clear winners. It creates fame. It also reduces risk for the group, sometimes. If two leaders can settle a moment of tension with a duel, it can prevent a larger mess. But duels also escalate. If you beat a man publicly, you might inherit his enemies. If you kill him, you might start a blood chain. So the duel is never just a duel. It's politics with weapons. Before Troy, many heroes are building their name through exactly these moments. Not necessarily formal duels announced like ceremonies, but clashes where someone's courage is seen, where someone's skill becomes rumor, where someone's gear becomes a subject of talk. That's another reason gear matters. A distinctive helmet, a beautifully made shield, a well-balanced spear. People remember. And when people remember, your name grows heavier. Now, something uncomfortable. A hero is expected to be brave. But bravery in this world is sometimes inseparable from aggression. The heroic ideal is not modern morality. A hero can be generous at a feast and ruthless in a raid. He can protect his guests and enslave people from a rival town. He can honor oaths and also look for opportunities to take. That contradiction is not hidden. It's part of the era. So when you think of battlefield habits, include that. You learn what is permitted, what is praised, what is condemned only in public. You learn what your household considers acceptable violence. And you learn what kinds of violence will make other households treat you as an enemy for generations. That's why leaders are cautious about when they raid and who they raid. Some targets are safe. Some are too connected. Some carry divine risk. Some will trigger a coalition response. So the hero's mind is always running two tracks. The physical track. Can I win this fight? Can I survive? And the social track. What does this do to my name? What does this do to my household? Who will hear about it? Who will use it against me? This is where the hero differs from a simple fighter. A simple fighter worries about living. A hero worries about living and being remembered. Now think about maintenance. It sounds boring. It is also life or death. After a trip, gear is checked. Spearheads are inspected. Sword edges are touched up. Leather is oiled. Straps are replaced. Dents are hammered out. Wood is checked for splits. A shield's face is repaired. If you neglect this, you pay later. Because in a fight, failure happens fast. A strap snaps. A shield handle breaks. A spearhead loosens. And suddenly you're naked in front of a man who isn't. So heroes learn to treat gear almost like a living thing. You care for it. You name it sometimes. Not because you're sentimental. Because making something personal makes you take it seriously. The same applies to horses. A horse is not a vehicle. A horse is a creature with moods. You feed it. You clean it. You check its hooves. You keep it calm. If you don't, it fails when you need it. And a hero who loses a horse loses more than mobility. He loses status. He loses a symbol that tells other men he belongs at the front. Before Troy, while the big coalition war hasn't pulled everyone into one camp yet, these habits are already forming. Men are already traveling, already fighting, already building reputations, already learning that metal and muscle are not enough. You need logistics. You need discipline. You need men who trust you. You need gear that holds. And you need a body trained not just for one heroic moment, but for repeated strain. Because the truth is that fame doesn't usually come from one clean strike. It comes from staying alive long enough for people to keep saying your name. And in this era, staying alive is not luck alone. It's preparation. It's maintenance. It's the quiet work that happens long before anyone sings. Before Troy, you learn quickly that your world is not held together by laws the way we mean laws. It's held together by memory, by witnesses, by promises spoken out loud, by gifts that quietly say we're connected now, and by the fear of being seen as small. In this setting, your strongest weapon is not always the spear. Sometimes it's your name. Sometimes it's your restraint. Sometimes it's the fact that you can make 10 men move at once with a glance because they believe you have the right to command. That right is not paperwork. It's reputation. And reputation has rules, not written rules, social rules. If you follow them well, people call you noble. If you break them, people call you dangerous. Sometimes dangerous still earns respect, but it also earns enemies. And enemies in a world of feuds don't fade away just because you move on. They wait. The most important thing to understand is that heroic society keeps score in public. The score is made of praise, insult, generosity, courage, and standing. You can think of it like a running balance. Every feast adds to it. Every refusal subtracts. Every victory adds. Every humiliation subtracts. Every oath you keep adds. Every oath you break can poison your name for years. This is why heroes are so sensitive. Not because they're fragile, because their status is their armor. If it cracks, people test you. And when people test you, you either respond well or you start bleeding power. A young hero sees this early. He watches older men compete without drawing blood. A compliment that is also a challenge. A joke that looks friendly until you hear the edge. A gift that feels generous but also puts you in someone's debt. A seat offered too far from the center. A cup offered too late. These things matter because this world doesn't treat them as just social. They are political actions. And the clearest example is insult. In a modern setting, you might shrug. Here, an insult can be an invitation to violence. Not immediately. Not always. But the insult changes your position. If you accept an insult publicly, people interpret it. They don't interpret it as maturity. They interpret it as weakness. And weakness creates pressure. Pressure makes rivals bold. So the hero class develops a habit that seems extreme from the outside. They protect their honor like a physical object. Because in a sense, it is. It's what keeps men loyal. It's what keeps enemies cautious. It's what makes your threats credible. This is also why heroes are obsessed with witnesses. If you do something brave and nobody sees it, it still matters to you, but it does less for your public score. If you do something shameful and nobody sees it, you may still feel it, but it does less damage. So much of the heroic code is about who knows, who can repeat, who can turn a story into a weapon. That is where bards matter, not as background music, as amplifiers. A singer can make a moment last longer than the moment's physical consequences. He can make a small victory feel huge. He can make a small humiliation feel permanent. And because heroes understand this, they behave as if a song is always being written. Now bring oaths into it. An oath in this world is not casual. It's not, "I promise" in a friendly tone. It's a binding act. It's spoken in public or in ritual. It's tied to the gods. It often involves sacrifice. That sacrifice does two things. First, it tells everyone that the promise is serious. Second, it brings divine pressure into the deal. You are not only risking your reputation, you are risking supernatural consequences. Even if you are skeptical, you still live in a culture where other people believe. And belief creates enforcement. If you break an oath, people do not just call you unreliable. They call you polluted. They start watching for misfortune around you. They interpret bad luck as proof. They use it to justify turning against you. So an oath is both spiritual and practical. It's a social chain. When one link breaks, the whole chain shakes. This is why alliances can be strong even without written contracts. Because everyone knows who swore what. And everyone knows the cost of being known as the kind of person who swears and breaks. But heroic society is not a neat morality play. Heroes also bend rules. They look for loopholes. They try to keep their image clean while doing messy things. They promise carefully. They speak in ways that leave space. They avoid swearing on the wrong thing. They choose witnesses who benefit them. This is political intelligence. And if you are a hero, you are expected to have it. Another part of the code is supplication. This is one of the strangest and most important behaviors in the heroic world. A person in danger can make a formal plea. He can kneel, he can clasp knees, he can touch the chin. He can put himself physically in a position that forces the other person to make a choice. If you accept the plea, you gain a reputation for controlled power. You look like a man who can win and still restrain himself. If you reject it, you may still look strong, but you can also look ruthless in a way that invites future retaliation. The key is that the supplicant makes it public. He is trying to bind you with witnesses. He is trying to turn your next action into a moral event. And that moral event has consequences. It affects who trusts you, who fears you, who wants you as an ally, who prays against you. Before Troy, this matters because life is full of moments where someone is at your mercy. A rival caught in a bad position, a raider captured, a man who realizes his household can't win a feud and tries to stop the blood, a messenger begging safe passage. If you treat mercy as weakness, you miss the deeper point. Mercy can be strategy. It can create obligation. It can end a chain. It can make you look like the kind of leader people want to follow. But mercy can also be risky. If you spare the wrong person, you may be sparing the seed of your future problem. So heroes develop another habit. They justify. If they kill, they explain why. If they spare, they explain why. Not because they need therapy. Because they need the room to agree with their choice. Agreement is protection. Now talk about revenge. Revenge is not an exotic concept here. It's a normal expectation. If someone kills your kin, people expect a response. If you don't respond, your household loses standing. Not because everyone loves violence. Because a household that will not defend itself invites more attacks. So a response is demanded. Sometimes it is direct blood. Sometimes it is compensation. This is where the world is more flexible than people assume. A feud does not always require endless killing. It can be settled. Livestock, metal, women offered in marriage, hostages exchanged, public apologies, oaths sworn, gifts presented. The point is to restore balance, to stop the chain, to make both sides able to stand in public without looking defeated. That last part is crucial. A settlement has to be survivable socially. If one side looks humiliated, they will come back later. If both sides can walk away saying we got justice, then the peace has a chance. So heroes learn to negotiate without looking like they're negotiating. They take counsel. They listen to elders. They consider what their men want. Because your warband has its own opinions. If your men think you're letting an insult slide, they might stop respecting you. If your men think you're taking unnecessary risks for pride, they might follow you less eagerly. A leader has to keep both enemies and followers in mind. That's why heroic leadership is exhausting. You don't just fight. You manage perception. Another major rule is hospitality. You've already felt it in the hall, but the full weight of it hits you when you travel. In a world of short sea routes and constant movement, you depend on other households. You land in unfamiliar places. You ask for water. You ask for food. You ask for shelter. Sometimes you arrive with gifts. Sometimes you arrive with nothing but a name. And if your name is known, it can open doors. That's one reason heroes chase fame. Fame makes the world safer. People treat you carefully when they know who you are. They treat you carefully because they want your favor. or because they fear your retaliation, or because they fear the gods' reaction to harming a guest. Hospitality is the public face of security. If a household becomes known for harming guests, other households become cautious. They refuse trade. They refuse marriage ties. They look for allies against that household. So even a ruthless leader often performs hospitality. He feeds you. He gives you a place. He hears you out. Not because he's pure, because it is safer for him to be seen as a proper host. But hospitality also has an edge. A guest owes respect. A guest is expected to behave. A guest who abuses hospitality is treated as a special kind of enemy, not just a rival. A violator. Someone who has stepped outside the code. And once someone is framed as outside the code, violence becomes easier to justify. This is another way heroic society polices itself. Not perfectly, but effectively enough that the system holds most of the time. Now bring in the hardest tension a hero lives with. The conflict between personal glory and household duty. A hero wants to be remembered. But he also has responsibilities. Protecting land, maintaining alliances, supporting family, creating heirs, keeping internal rivals from splintering the house. Sometimes those duties pull in opposite directions. A bold raid might build your name. It might also provoke retaliation that harms your people. A risky duel might prove your courage. It might also get you killed, leaving your household leaderless. So before Troy, hero life is full of decisions where both choices carry cost. And the code exists to guide those decisions. Not as a calm philosophy, as a set of expectations that tell you what kind of man you are allowed to be. If you are brave but reckless, elders praise your spirit while quietly worrying. If you are careful but not bold enough, they call you prudent while privately doubting your greatness. If you are generous, they call you noble. If you are stingy, they call you small. If you keep your oaths, they call you trustworthy. If you twist them, they call you clever, and then they stop trusting you. The code is not about being good. It is about being legible. It tells other people how to predict you. And predictability is a kind of safety. When war finally comes in a larger form, men will need to know what you do under pressure. Will you share loot? Will you stand? Will you break? Will you keep promises? Will you protect friends? Will you respect the rules of the camp? Before Troy, all of this is already being tested in smaller ways. A feast is a test. A journey is a test. A raid is a test. A dispute in the hall is a test. A marriage negotiation is a test. Every time you speak in public, you are adding lines to the story people tell about you. And those stories turn into real consequences. They decide whether a neighboring leader answers your call, whether he laughs at it, whether he delays until your problem becomes your funeral. So when you hear heroic code, don't imagine an abstract set of noble ideals. Imagine a living social contract, enforced by praise and shame, by gifts and grudges, by oaths and fear. It's what makes a collection of small kingdoms function without constant collapse. And it's what makes the coming coalition possible. Because when the time comes to ask dozens of leaders to move together, the first tool will not be force. It will be obligation. The obligations built over years. The obligations built in halls. The obligations built by oaths. The obligations built by the need to keep one's name intact in front of the whole Greek world. Before Troy pulls the Greek kings into a single story, your life is already stitched into something larger than your own walls. Not through grand speeches. Through routes. Through the slow, steady motion of people and goods. Through the fact that if you stand on a headland long enough, you eventually see a sail. You are born into a world where travel is normal for the elite. Not leisurely, necessary. A hero who never leaves home becomes a rumor that fades. A hero who travels becomes a name that spreads. And spreading is a kind of power. On land, travel is work. The roads are not paved the way later empires will pave them. Paths climb and twist. They cut through rock. They skirt ravines. They run along ridge lines where you can see far, but you can also be seen. If you move with a small group, you move quietly. If you move with a large group, you move slowly. Either way, you plan around water, around places where animals can drink, around friendly villages, around the farms that owe your household loyalty. Because a night on the road is not a neutral thing. It is exposure. Your cloak is thinner than you want. The cold settles in. A twisted ankle can turn a confident journey into a limp that makes you easy prey. So you travel with people. You travel with a guard. You travel with companions who know the routes. And when you travel, you carry proof. Not an official stamp. Your name. A gift from a powerful household. A token. A piece of metal. Something that signals you are not an easy target. Because along those land routes are others. Men moving livestock. Messengers running hard. Traders carrying small valuables. Bandits who live on the edges. Local strongmen who feel the urge to test anyone passing through. A hero learns quickly that violence doesn't require a battlefield. It only requires opportunity. But the land routes, for all their danger, are still limited by terrain. Mountains keep people separate. Narrow passes create choke points. Bad weather can trap you. The sea is different. The sea is the fast lane. It is also the place where the world feels both wider and sharper. Because a ship can deliver trade. It can also deliver a raid. And from the shore, the two can look identical until it's too late. When you travel by sea in this era, you rarely sail straight across open water for the thrill of it. You hop, island to island, headland to headland. You learn which points are visible from each other. You learn the color of water over shoals. You learn the smell of a storm before you see the clouds. You learn how quickly the mood of the sea changes. Even experienced sailors respect it because the sea isn't impressed by courage. If it wants to take your ship, it will. The ship itself is a compromise. You want speed. You want cargo space. You want stability. You want men to be able to row when the wind dies. You want a sail for the long stretches. And you want enough freeboard that waves don't simply pour over you. Depending on the job, ships can lean more toward one purpose or another. A vessel built to move goods is shaped by weight. A vessel built to move fighters is shaped by speed and control. And the elite world cares about both. Because your household's wealth depends on goods moving. And your household's safety depends on fighters moving. A hero grows up hearing the language of ships, not technical diagrams. Practical talk. How many oars? How many men? How many days of food? How much water? What the wind did last season? Which island harbors are safe? Which ones have a leader who might welcome you with hospitality and then quietly hold you for leverage? Because that happens. Hospitality is a sacred expectation, but it is also a tool. A clever household can use guests the way it uses hostages. The sea makes all of this more intense because it compresses distance. A coastal town that seems far away on foot might be a short sail away. That means grudges travel faster. Alliances can be activated faster. Trade can arrive faster. Trouble can arrive faster. If you are a hero in training, Sea travel becomes part of your education in power. You learn how to step onto a deck and not look like a boy. You learn how to keep your balance when the wood under you becomes a living thing. You learn how to sit for hours with your knees cramped and your back stiff, pretending discomfort is beneath you. You learn to eat without wasting food. You learn to drink without draining the water. You learn to sleep in small spaces while the hull creaks. And you learn the rule that everyone on a ship eventually understands. A ship is a household. It is a floating version of the same social machine. Someone commands. Others obey. Someone distributes the limited resources. Everyone watches everyone, because on the sea you cannot simply walk away from people you dislike. You are stuck with them. That pressure either creates loyalty or creates a crisis. A good leader learns to keep that crisis from forming. Now look at what moves on these routes. Some of it is obvious. Pottery, oil, wine, wool and cloth, livestock when the trip is short enough and the island stops are planned. Some of it is more valuable. Metal, bronze objects, weapons, tools, and the metals behind bronze. Copper is heavy and easier to identify. Tin is the strange one. The one your world depends on, and yet it is not sitting conveniently in the hills near your home. That means tin arrives through relationships, through trade, through gifting, through alliances, through exchanges that are sometimes peaceful and sometimes ugly. A hero may not negotiate the purchase of tin personally, but he feels its presence. He feels it when a smith has enough metal to work. He feels it when his spearheads can be replaced. He feels it when a workshop is busy instead of silent. He feels it when a rival household suddenly seems better equipped, as if they gained access to a new source. So a hero becomes sensitive to trade as a form of warfare. If you can choke a rival's access to metal, you can weaken them without fighting a set battle. If you can secure a better flow of goods, you can strengthen your own household quietly. This is one reason elite households care about sea contacts. Not because they love adventure, because ships bring leverage, and leverage keeps you alive. The archaeological record, the pieces that survive, suggests a world where Mycenaean goods traveled far. Pottery, made in Aegean styles, shows up around the Eastern Mediterranean. Objects from the Near East show up in Aegean elite contexts. This is not a closed little Greece. It is a connected zone, with the sea acting like a corridor. If you could stand in the right storeroom and look at what is stacked there, you would see the wider world without leaving home. A carved object that doesn't match local style. A bit of glass or faience. A piece of metalwork with foreign technique. A seal stone. A precious material that had to cross multiple hands to reach you. Each object is a story of connections, and each connection can be turned into a bond, or into a reason for conflict. Because in this era, trade and raiding are close cousins. A ship approaches. Men arrive with gifts, or men arrive with weapons. Sometimes the same ship does both, depending on how the meeting goes. You can think of it as a spectrum. On one end is formal exchange, gifts given publicly, friendship declared, oaths spoken, meals shared. On the other end is violence, a fast landing, a quick grab, a retreat back to the water before defenders gather. And in the middle are the messy situations. A trade that becomes a threat. A gift that feels like an insult. A negotiation that ends with someone drawing a knife. A visit that turns into taking hostages. This is why coastal defenses matter. Why watch posts matter. why men are trained to run and shout and rally. Because a raid is often a timing game. The attackers rely on speed. They rely on confusion. They rely on the moment before a household can wake up fully. So the defenders rely on early warning. A horn. A fire signal. A runner. A line of men who can form quickly. And if you are a hero, you are part of that response. You are expected to be the first face people look for when the alarm goes out. Not because you are magical, because your presence calms panic. A warband doesn't need you to be perfect. It needs you to be visible. Now consider the idea that floats under later Trojan stories. The Greeks of epic memory imagined Troy as a great city on the edge of the Aegean world, a place where trade routes and sea lanes compress into a single bottleneck. In modern scholarship, there is a strong tendency to link that poetic memory to real late Bronze Age politics in Western Anatolia. Hittite texts, written far to the east, speak of a place often identified with the region of Troy, and of a powerful group across the sea, often identified with the Mycenaean Greeks. The names are not identical to later Greek names. They are foreign spellings. They are a different language's attempt to capture sounds. So there is uncertainty, but the pattern is persuasive enough that many historians treat it seriously. Not as proof of a single Homeric war, exactly as later poetry tells it. More as proof that the Aegean world and Anatolia were in contact, sometimes friendly, sometimes hostile, and that conflicts around those routes were real. For you living before Troy, that matters as a pressure in the background. You hear rumors. You hear that certain eastern cities are rich. You hear that ships returning from those coasts carry goods that make men stare. You hear that kings in Anatolia speak through diplomats and treaties. You hear that a leader who controls key crossings can tax trade, intimidate smaller towns, and become the kind of power that other powers must negotiate with. And you begin to understand why a coalition war might someday happen. Not because everyone wakes up and chooses destiny. Because the routes make certain conflicts likely. Because competition over access is constant. Because the sea rewards boldness and punishes weakness. Now, pull the lens back even more. The late Bronze Age Eastern Mediterranean is full of large states and smaller states. Egypt has its own systems. The Hittites dominate large parts of Anatolia. Cities in the Levant trade, fight, and survive between larger powers. Cyprus is crucial for copper. Crete has its own history of palace centers and sea influence. And the Mycenaean world sits among these networks, not isolated. Your household might never send an envoy to an Egyptian court, but it might host a trader who has been to a place that has been to Egypt. It might handle goods that passed through Cyprus. It might acquire a luxury item that originated in the Levant. So even if you never travel far, your world comes to you. This is where a hero's education in diplomacy becomes practical. You learn to treat strangers as potential bridges. You learn to treat translators and intermediaries with respect because they can change the meaning of your words. You learn that the wrong gesture can be interpreted as hostility. You learn that gifts must be chosen carefully. If you give too little to a visiting leader or a high-status merchant, you risk insulting them. If you give too much, you risk looking desperate, or you risk draining your own reserves. And if you give something that feels too personal, you might accidentally bind yourself into an obligation you didn't intend. So elite life becomes a constant practice in calibrated generosity. Not just at home, everywhere you go. When you travel to another court, the first night matters. You step into a hall that is not yours. The smoke smells different. The dogs are different. The cups are shaped differently. The local men watch you the way wolves watch a newcomer. They are deciding whether you are worth honoring. They are deciding whether your household is worth respecting. They are deciding whether you are someone they can safely mock. And you are doing the same. A hero learns to read small details. How many guards stand near the doorway? How relaxed they look. Whether the host's companions glance at one another before speaking, as if checking permission. Whether the host's smile reaches his eyes. Whether the household seems confident or brittle. Because brittle households break. And when they break, they create opportunities. If you are honest with yourself, that's part of what a hero is always scanning for. The crack. The weakness. The moment when taking becomes possible. Not always for cruelty. Sometimes for survival. Sometimes because the code of your era treats conquest and raiding as normal tools of elite competition. Now think about what this does to your personal identity. A hero's name travels ahead of him, sometimes as praise, sometimes as warning, sometimes as gossip. A story about you might change as it moves from island to island. A small act of courage can become legendary. A small act of foolishness can become the thing people remember. So you become careful, not timid, careful. You learn to perform consistency. You learn to be the kind of person people can summarize in one sentence. He is brave. He is generous. He is dangerous. He is disciplined. Those summaries are valuable. They make you predictable. And predictability, in a world of alliances, makes other leaders more willing to take risks alongside you. This is why heroes cultivate companions on the road. A journey is where relationships harden. A man who shares discomfort with you becomes easier to trust. A man who watches the sea with you at night becomes part of your inner circle. A man who rows beside you until his hands blister becomes connected to you in a way that a feast alone cannot create. And those connections matter because travel is where mistakes happen. Storms force decisions. A wrong landing forces a fight. A shortage of water turns men irritable. A delay means arriving late to a meeting that someone else will interpret as disrespect. So a leader's skill is tested constantly on the road. Not just in battle, in judgment, in patience, in knowing when to push and when to stop, in knowing when to pay a toll and when to refuse, in knowing when to talk and when to stay silent, because silence can be a form of strength too. Now, there is one more layer to the wider world that a hero senses, even if he can't name it: instability. Near the end of the late Bronze Age, large systems begin to strain. Some palaces burn. Some routes become less reliable. Some regions experience disruptions that later generations will remember as collapse. In your before Troy life, you may not call it collapse. You call it rumors. Fewer ships arriving on schedule. More talk of raids. More refugees moving. More desperate bargaining. More leaders tightening their grip at home. A world where people start to act like the future is less certain than it used to be. That feeling matters. Because it makes strong leaders more aggressive. It makes cautious leaders more defensive. It makes alliances shift. It makes the temptation of a big expedition feel more reasonable. If the world is changing, men start reaching for dramatic solutions. They start reaching for a prize that might stabilize them. Or at least distract them. Or at least give them a story big enough that no one notices the cracks at home. So the roads and sea lanes are not background scenery. They are the bloodstream. They carry goods. They carry people. They carry danger. They carry rumors. They carry obligations. They carry grudges. And if you are a Greek hero before Troy, you spend your early life learning how to move inside that flow without drowning in it. You learn how to travel and remain respected. You learn how to arrive with the right gifts. You learn how to leave without creating an enemy. You learn how to take what you need without turning the entire sea into a net of revenge. And slowly, without anyone announcing it, you become the kind of person whose life is no longer local. Your household is still your anchor, but your horizon is wider. Wider enough that when the call finally comes, when a larger oath begins to tighten, you already understand what it means. It means ships. It means routes. It means shared danger. It means that the sea, which has been connecting you to the world your whole life, is about to connect you to a war that will swallow everything. The first time death feels personal, it rarely happens on a battlefield. It happens in the quiet. It happens when you wake before sunrise and hear a sound in the courtyard that doesn't belong to a normal morning. A low, steady crying. Not the quick noise of an argument. Not the sharp bark of a command. Something older. Something that pulls air out of the room. Before Troy, you lived close to the dead. Not because your world is uniquely grim. Because your world is built on risk. Men ride. Men hunt. Men raid. Men argue with steel near the edges of pride. A fall breaks a neck. A boar opens a thigh. A ship goes down and comes back as driftwood. So when someone important dies, the household does not treat it like a private sadness. It becomes an event. It becomes a public test. It becomes a moment when everyone watches to see whether the house still holds. There are places where the dead are kept close. Not inside your hall. Outside the walls, where the earth can do what it does. Along a slope. Near a road. Near a ridge where people pass and remember. In some regions, the elite build tombs you can't ignore. A long passage cut into the ground. A doorway. A chamber. Or a great beehive-shaped structure of stone rising like an intentional hill. The form varies with place and time, but the idea stays steady. The dead of the powerful are not meant to vanish. They are meant to remain present. A reminder, a claim, a warning. And when you are young, you learn that a tomb is not only for the person inside it. It is for the living. It tells the countryside who owns this land. It tells rivals that the line has depth. It tells allies that this house keeps its own. It tells dependents that this is the kind of place where your labor builds something lasting. So when a hero dies, the household does not simply bury him. It performs the burial. The body is prepared, washed, oiled, sometimes wrapped, sometimes dressed in clothing that signals status even when no one will see it again. And then there is the gathering. Men arrive from nearby villages. Kin arrive. Allies arrive. Sometimes rivals arrive, because even rivals must acknowledge a death if they want to stay legible inside the social code. A funeral is one of the few moments when an enemy can step into your space without it automatically becoming violence. That's part of why funerals matter. They give the world a controlled setting to measure strength without immediate blood. The laments begin. In later Greek memory, you will hear of formal mourning, the kind of structured grief that sounds like a song and a complaint at the same time. In a Bronze Age household, the shape can be different from region to region, but the core feeling is recognizable. Grief is not silent. Grief is not hidden. Grief is loud enough to become proof. Proof that the dead person mattered. Proof that the household values its own. Proof that losing this man is a loss the community should feel. And if the man was a fighter, there is another layer. The household wants the mourners to remember what he did, who he fought, who he protected, who he shamed, what he gave away, what he built. Because remembrance is the closest thing your world has to immortality. You have already felt how life is measured in public. In death, That measurement becomes sharper. Now you see how stories are made. Not by poets alone. By a room full of people repeating the same phrases until they settle. He was brave. He was generous. He was hard. He was lucky. He was chosen by the gods. Or, more quietly, he was dangerous, and we're relieved he's gone. Even that can happen. Not spoken out loud, but felt. And felt things shape politics too. Then comes the offering. This is one of the clearest windows into how your world thinks. The dead are given objects, sometimes humble, sometimes lavish. Ceramic vessels, weapons, jewelry, a seal, a ring, a cup, a knife. The specific set depends on place, rank, and the household's current strength. But the act itself tells you something. Your people do not treat death as clean erasure. They treat it as transition. A movement into a state that still deserves care, still deserves respect, still deserves ritual attention. In some tombs, you will later find evidence that people returned. Food remains, animal bones, fragments of cups, signs that people drank and poured liquids as part of the ritual. You don't need a scholar's voice to understand what that means. It means the living kept visiting. It means the dead stayed in the social world. And for a hero, that is the real dream. Not just to die, to be visited, to be spoken of, to remain a presence. If you are a young hero, funerals do something unsettling. They make the future visible. You watch an older warrior lowered into the earth. You watch his armor disappear. You watch his name become past tense. And you realize, with a cold clarity that lasts for years, that you are not exempt. Your strength is temporary. Your speed is temporary. Even your household's stone walls are temporary. What lasts is what people say. What lasts is what people agree to remember. This is why heroic culture loves dramatic choices. Because dramatic choices become easy to repeat. They become clean stories. And clean stories outlast complicated truth. But your world does not live only in funerals. It lives in the constant negotiation between humans and the divine. In later Greek writing, the gods appear in bright scenes and clear speeches. Before Troy, the gods are less theatrical, more constant, more like a pressure you feel on your skin. They are in weather, in illness, in sudden luck, in the way the sea turns without warning, in the way a horse spooks for no visible reason, in the way a man dreams something too sharp to ignore. So you grow up in a culture of offerings, not always grand, often small. A pinch of grain, a splash of wine, a bit of oil, a portion of meat set aside, a promise made quietly under your breath. The logic is practical. If the gods can help you, you want them inclined to help. If the gods can harm you, you want them persuaded not to. And because your world runs on exchange, it makes sense to your mind that exchange also works upward. You give. You receive. You give again. But the gods are not a single face. They are a crowd. Some are local powers. A spring, a cave, a grove, a hilltop where offerings gather like stones. Some are names that later generations will recognize clearly. And even in the administrative record of palatial centers, those names show up. Offerings recorded to major deities, to Zeus, to Hera, to Hermes, to Poseidon, to powerful female figures often described simply as lady, a title that can hide more than it reveals. Those tablets are not poems, but they hint at something important. Religion in your world is not only private prayer, it is embedded in administration. Goods move toward shrines. People have roles in ritual. A palace can coordinate offerings the way it coordinates everything else. That tells you the gods are part of governance. They legitimize authority. They weigh on oaths. They become a language leaders use when they want their decisions to sound larger than personal preference. A young hero absorbs this early. If your father makes a promise, he often anchors it in the divine. Not because he likes ceremony, because ceremony makes the promise heavier. It creates witnesses. And it invites fear. Not only fear of men, fear of consequences that feel beyond human control. In that sense, the gods are part of the social system. They are a shared assumption, a shared pressure, a shared explanation when things go wrong. But it's not only offerings, it's signs. And signs are how a hero learns patience. Because no matter how strong you are, there are moments when you cannot force an outcome. You can't force the wind. You can't force a storm to wait. You can't force a sickness to release a child. You can't force a harvest to grow. So you watch. People in your world watch birds. Not casually, with seriousness. They watch the direction a bird crosses the sky. They watch whether it appears on the right or left. They watch whether it fights another bird. They listen to what kind of cry it makes. They interpret, sometimes with confidence, sometimes with anxious debate. And because interpretation matters, specialists become important. Seers. Men who claim the ability to read the gods, preferences. Men who can look at a sacrifice and speak about what it means. If you are a leader, you can ignore a seer. But ignoring a seer is risky. Because if something later goes wrong, your rivals will say you were warned. And a leader who ignores warnings looks reckless in a way that scares followers. So even a proud hero learns the value of consultation. Not because he is humble, because he is calculating. One of the most charged moments is sacrifice. A public sacrifice is not a quiet spiritual act. It is a gathering, a display, a way to feed people, a way to tie the household to the divine. An animal is brought, a prayer is spoken, a blade flashes, blood hits the ground, smoke rises, meat is cooked, portions are distributed. And in that distribution, the same politics you saw in the feast returns. Who receives? Who is honored? Who is kept waiting? But sacrifice also has a darker edge, because blood is not treated as clean. Killing, even justified killing, can be seen as a kind of contamination. Not the modern moral sense, a ritual sense. A sense that certain acts leave residue. A leader who sheds blood may need cleansing. A household that has experienced certain kinds of death may need ritual repair. Water matters. Fire matters. Specific acts of washing. Specific offerings. Specific ways of re-entering the normal social world. If you are a hero who is killed, you learn that victory isn't only a physical state. It has to be made socially safe. Safe enough that people will eat with you. Safe enough that people will accept your gifts. Safe enough that allies will stand beside you without feeling the gods might punish them for proximity. This is part of why the heroic code cares about behavior after violence. It's not only ethics, it's spiritual management. Now, the thing that a young hero notices, but rarely says out loud, religion is also uncertainty. Even the most confident leader does not truly know what the gods want. He guesses. He interprets. He listens to specialists. He performs the expected rituals. But the world still surprises him. A sacrifice does not guarantee safe travel. An offering does not guarantee a healthy child. A prayer does not guarantee victory. So religion becomes another arena of reputation. A leader is praised when luck follows him. He is suspected when misfortune follows him. People begin to talk about favor, about anger, about whether a household has offended something larger. This is why leaders are careful about sacred places, why they respect certain groves, why they hesitate before taking from a shrine. Because the price of sacrilege isn't only divine, it's social. If you become known as the kind of man who insults the gods, you become difficult to trust. Even men who are personally skeptical will still fear the consequences of standing too close to you. And that fear can isolate you. Isolation is deadly in a world built on alliances. All of this feeds into the deep tension that shapes the pre-Troy years. Every household wants to expand. Every household wants to be safe. Every household wants the gods to approve. And yet the world keeps tightening. Trade routes are contested. Rivals test borders. Rumors move faster than facts. So leaders become more willing to make larger promises. Promises that require many men. Promises that require ships. Promises that require a shared cause, big enough to pull rival kings into one direction. Later Greek tradition will frame this with famous oaths, famous triggers, famous names. The oath extracted from Helen's suitors. The call that obligates men who would rather stay home. The gathering at a port where the ships sit and wait for wind. And the idea that a leader might be pushed to do something terrible to make the world move again. Whether every detail of that later story happened exactly as sung is not the point for you living before it. What matters is the logic beneath it. In your world, oaths are binding. In your world, reputation forces men into commitments. In your world, the sea can trap an army as effectively as an enemy. In your world, the gods are believed to influence all of it. So when people speak about destiny, they are not being poetic. They are describing the way social pressure, ritual expectation, and fear of shame can make a path feel unavoidable. A young hero feels this in small ways first. A promise made at a feast. A gift accepted in public. A marriage tie that becomes a chain. A minor oath sworn near a hearth that later becomes a demand. And when he stands at a tomb and hears the lament for an older man, he feels it in a heavier way. He realizes he is being pulled towards something. Not by magic, by the structure of his world, by the fact that he is a name bearer, by the fact that people expect him to do what heroes do. And what heroes do, sooner or later, is walk toward danger while everyone watches. So before Troy, you learn to live with two kinds of silence. The silence of a tomb chamber when the last torch goes out, and the silence of a shrine at dawn when you pour out a small offering and listen for nothing. You learn to accept that nothing is still an answer. You learn to move anyway. You learn to make yourself worthy in the only way your world can measure. By being remembered, by being spoken of, by being the kind of person whose death would make the courtyard fill with voices. Not because you want grief, because grief is proof that your life mattered. And in a world that offers no clean certainty, that proof becomes the closest thing to peace. You don't notice how much your world runs on stories until you try to live without them. Before Troy, you can be strong and still be nobody. You can win a fight in a field and still be treated like a loud local problem. Because strength is private, and fame is public. Fame is what happens when people repeat you. Not just your name, your pattern. The kind of man you are said to be. The kind of man other men can predict. And prediction is comfort. Comfort is alliance. Alliance is survival. So slowly you learn that your life is split into two lives. There's the life you live, and there's the life people tell. In the morning, those lives feel close together. You wake, you train, you eat, you argue, you ride. You handle some small violence and some small politics. But at night, in the hall, the second life begins. The version that lasts. The version that can travel. The fire is low. The cups are lighter because the wine has been moving for hours. The dogs are half asleep. And the singer or the storyteller or the old man with a good voice finds a place near the hearth. He doesn't need a stage. The room makes one for him. When he speaks, people settle. Not because they are polite. Because what he says shapes the social world. It shapes what your neighbors believe. It shapes what your rivals fear. It shapes what your allies brag about when they need to sound important. And, most of all, it shapes what you will be forced to live up to. A hero's first relationship with song is uncomfortable, because you realize you are being weighed, not by a scale, by memory. A singer can lift you. He can also pin you. He can take a moment where you hesitated and turn it into a lesson about cowardice. He can take a moment where you held back and turn it into a lesson about wisdom. The difference between those two versions is often not the event. It's who tells it and who wants what. So you learn to pay attention, not only to fights, to narration. Who tells stories in your household? Who they praise? Who they avoid? Who they mock? Who they treat as inevitable? In a strong household, the stories tend to flatter the house. Not in a silly way, in a steady way. They remind everyone in the hall that this line has depth, that the fathers were brave, that the fathers were generous, that the gods favored them, that the land is meant to belong to this family. These aren't just bedtime tales. They are maintenance. They keep dependents loyal. They keep young men hungry. They keep rivals cautious. Now, outside your household, story spreads differently. You don't have paper. You don't have public announcements that can reach a whole country overnight. You have mouths, feet, ships, and the places where people gather. Markets, fairs, shrines, seasonal festivals, funerals, big feasts where multiple households show up. That's where reputation moves. A man walks in. Someone recognizes him. Someone else says, quietly, "That's the one." A story follows. And if the story is good, it gets repeated before the cups are empty. So you become aware of gatherings as opportunities, not only for enjoyment, for expansion. The simplest kind of gathering is the local feast. A neighboring leader invites your household. Your father sends you, or you go with older companions. You arrive with gifts. You arrive with clean gear. You arrive with the posture that says, "I belong here." In that hall, you're tested. Maybe not with weapons, with conversation. A leader might praise your father and then pause, watching how you respond. If you glow too much, you look needy. If you shrug it off, you look arrogant. So you learn to accept praise as if it is normal. You learn to let your face say thank you without saying please keep talking. Then the tests get sharper. A rival's son may needle you. A joke about your age. A joke about your household. A joke about a small failure your father had last year. The room watches your eyes, not your fists. If you leap, you look easy to control. If you do nothing, you look weak. So you answer. You answer with calm, with a line that sounds light and still lands. You learn to fight with words in a way that doesn't spill blood in the wrong place. Because blood in a hall is not always heroic. Sometimes it's just embarrassing. Sometimes it's an admission that you couldn't handle pressure. Sometimes it makes your household look unstable. And instability is a scent predators love. Now the next level of gathering. Competitive gatherings, games, contests, races, wrestling, throwing, sometimes archery, sometimes skill tests that look like fun but operate like selection. These events exist for a few reasons. One is simple release. Men full of energy and pride need places to burn it safely. Another is social sorting. If you don't compete, people assume you're hiding. And if you hide, they assume you're weak. The third reason is that games are a clean way to build a name without starting a feud. Winning a wrestling match is humiliating for the loser, yes. But it is a managed humiliation. It fits inside accepted ritual. It doesn't automatically demand blood. So a hero uses games the way he uses feasts. As a public platform, you can feel the mood when the contests start. A circle forms. Dust under feet. The sun is higher. The air smells like sweat and dry grass. Someone shouts a name. Someone else laughs. And then two young men step forward. If you're one of them, you try to keep your breathing steady. You can feel the watchers, the leaders, the old fighters, the girls who will be married as alliances, the merchants who want to know which household is rising, the men who are deciding whether you are worth following. It's just a match. And it's not just a match. When you grip another man's arm, when you hook a leg, when you try to throw him cleanly, you are showing more than strength. You are showing control. You are showing discipline. You are showing whether you panic. You are showing whether you are cruel. Because cruelty matters here. Not in a modern moral lecture way. In a social calculus way. If you humiliate men for sport, they remember. They might obey you in fear. But fear is unstable. Fear breaks at the wrong time. So the smartest young heroes learn the balance. Win hard. But don't spit on the loser. Don't grind his face into the dirt while the crowd laughs. Help him up. Make it look like you have enough confidence to be generous. Generosity, even in victory, keeps your name usable. Because you are building a future where you will need that man's cousin, that man's brother, that man's household. And the time to protect future alliances is now, when you can. Games are also where prizes become social signals. A cloak, a tripod, a cup, a piece of metal, an animal, a weapon. The object itself matters, but the moment matters more. A leader presents it. He announces the winner. He makes a public statement about who deserves honor. And by doing that, he distributes status. So when you win, you are not only taking a prize, you are receiving recognition, a public stamp. That recognition spreads faster than any private rumor. Because a prize is visible. You can carry it. You can display it. You can give it away later to create another bond. That's how heroic life loops. Now, one of the most intense gatherings in your world is a funeral. Because a funeral is the place where grief and politics overlap completely. A household loses a man. The household must show strength anyway. So funerals often include feasting, and sometimes games. Not always, not in every region. But the concept makes sense. You honor the dead by gathering. You reinforce alliances by feeding people. You reaffirm hierarchy by distributing gifts. You give young men a place to prove themselves in front of elders. And you turn the dead man's memory into a public event that outlasts the body. If you have ever stood near a tomb while the lament rises behind you, you know the feeling. It's like the air has weight. The voices are loud enough to carry into the countryside. People passing on the road hear it and understand something happened here. A line was cut. A household is changing. In that moment, the contests, if they happen, are not joyful. They are solemn. They feel like a promise. A promise that the household will continue. That there are young men ready to replace the dead. Ready to carry the name. Ready to protect the walls. So when you step into a contest at a funeral, you step into it as an announcement. You are saying, without words, the line still has teeth. That is how heroic culture fights despair. Not by avoiding death, by performing continuity. Now there is another kind of gathering that shapes your world. The shrine, the sacred place. A hilltop where offerings accumulate. A grove where people speak quietly. A spring that everyone treats with caution. A coastal sanctuary where travelers stop. These places matter because they pull people from multiple households into the same space. Not as enemies, as participants. Even rivals can stand near the same altar without drawing a blade, because the space has rules. And those rules create opportunities. A leader can meet another leader by chance. A marriage discussion can begin with a shared offering. A dispute can be cooled because both sides have to behave. And if you're a young hero, you learn how to be seen there. Not loud, respectful, confident. A man who understands the gods and the room. Because shrines are not only spiritual, they are diplomatic. They create neutral ground. Neutral ground is rare, so it becomes valuable. And where something is valuable, heroes gather. Now step back and notice something. All these gatherings, feasts, games, funerals, shrines, share a single purpose. They manufacture consensus. They create shared memories. They create witnesses. And witnesses are the backbone of obligation. A promise made privately can be denied. A promise made in front of men who will repeat it is hard to escape. So if you want to understand why Troy becomes possible, you have to understand this. Troy, as an expedition, would require something strange for your world. Cooperation at scale. Multiple kings moving in one direction. Men who dislike each other sharing ships and camps. Leaders agreeing, at least in public, on who has authority. That doesn't happen because people suddenly become mature. It happens because obligation becomes heavier than preference. An obligation is built in gatherings, built over years, built through gifts, built through marriages, built through oaths, built through the fear of public shame. A young hero experiences this tightening before he can name it. He notices that visits between courts become more frequent. He notices that certain leaders keep showing up at the same festivals. He notices that the same names are repeated, that certain households seem to be weaving a larger net. He notices that messengers arrive more often, that the tone of conversations in the hall shifts, less relaxed, more deliberate. And he notices something else. The stories change. The songs become more pointed. They praise unity. They praise shared action. They praise men who left home and gained lasting glory. They remind listeners of older expeditions, older raids, older journeys. They plant the idea that leaving is not only acceptable, it is admirable. It is necessary. A song can do that. It can make a choice feel noble. It can make hesitation feel shameful. That's why the singer matters. And that's why leaders pay attention to who sings what. Now, none of this means you are a puppet. You still choose. You still have agency. But your agency exists inside a culture that rewards certain choices. And the rewards are real. A successful raid returns with animals, metal, captives, a stronger household. A man who returns with wealth can host bigger feasts. A man who hosts bigger feasts attracts better allies. A man with better allies can take bigger risks. A man who takes bigger risks can produce bigger stories. That loop is addictive. It can pull you out of your walls, even if part of you wants to stay, because staying is safe, and safety is comfortable. But comfort is not what your world celebrates. Your world celebrates the man who risks comfort and returns with something to show, or the man who risks comfort and dies in a way that makes people remember. That is the brutal truth under the beauty. Now, if you want to picture how reputation travels, picture the sea. A ship leaves. It stops at an island. Men trade. Men drink. Men talk. Someone says, "Have you heard about the young one from that hill fort?" Someone else says, "Yes, he broke a man's shoulder in the wrestling ring." A third says, "I heard he held his temper when he was insulted." And suddenly you are becoming a story. Not because you tried to be, because someone found your behavior useful to repeat. Maybe they repeat it because it flatters their ally. Maybe they repeat it because it warns their rival. Maybe they repeat it because it's entertaining. Either way, it moves. And when it returns to you, it returns changed. Bigger, sharper, more certain. That can help you. It can also trap you. Because if your story becomes the calm one, people expect calm. If your story becomes the ruthless one, people fear you. If your story becomes the generous one, people expect gifts. If your story becomes the lucky one, people assume the gods are on your side. And all those expectations can become demands. So you learn to manage your own myth, even while you are still living. You learn not to brag too loudly. Bragging makes people want to cut you down. You learn not to hide. Hiding makes people assume you're weak. You learn to let others praise you. Praise from others is more believable. You learn to do bold things where witnesses can see, not because you are shallow, because witnesses are currency. Now add one more layer. Marriage. Every time a marriage is made, it does something to the story web. It ties two houses. It creates shared grandchildren. It creates obligations that are hard to ignore. It creates a situation where an insult to one house becomes an insult to both. And it creates something else. It creates pathways for news. A woman who moves into another household becomes a living channel. She carries knowledge, customs, private opinions. She can soften tension. She can inflame it. She can persuade. She can warn. She can remind men of promises when they are tempted to forget. So when leaders arrange marriages before Troy, they are not just thinking about heirs. They are building a communication network, a way to keep a broader coalition warm. And when that coalition is finally needed, it will not feel like strangers. It will feel like relatives. Relatives who still argue. Relatives who still compete. But relatives bound by shame and blood and public memory. If you are honest, that is the kind of bond that can move an army. Because it is not only strategic, it is emotional. And emotions in your world are not treated as private. They are treated as public forces. Anger, pride, grief, desire, shame, all of these are engines. A leader who can harness them can make men do things that don't make sense on paper. And since you don't live on paper, that matters. So before Troy, while the ships are still mostly small and the conflicts are still mostly local, the bigger machinery is already in motion. Not as fate, as network, as story, as gathering, as the steady creation of obligations that will eventually become too heavy to drop. You can feel it in the way people talk. You can feel it in the way leaders look toward the coast more often. You can feel it in the way young men train with more focus. You can feel it in the way old men tell stories that make leaving sound glorious. And you, sitting near the hearth, listening, holding your cup, begin to realize something that changes the shape of your sleep. Your life is not just your life. It is raw material. And the world around you is always deciding what to make of it. So you start to choose your moments. You start to choose your witnesses. You start to choose your risks. Because somewhere ahead, beyond the familiar routes, there is a war-shaped horizon. And the men who will walk toward it are already being assembled. Not with trumpets, with gatherings, with prizes, with oaths, with stories, and with the quiet understanding that, in your world, the only life that truly lasts is the one other people keep telling. Somewhere in your childhood, war is a distant sound, a rumor carried by sailors, a line in a song, a bruise on an older man's ribs when he comes home and refuses to explain it. But as you grow into your strength, war stops feeling distant. It starts feeling like weather, not always present, always possible. And in the years just before Troy, that possibility gets louder. You feel it in the way people stop laughing as easily. You feel it in the way visitors arrive with less small talk and more careful listening. You feel it in the way older men begin to name faraway places like they're already on the road. And you feel it most in the way obligations begin to tighten. In a world built on reputation, a man is only as free as his promises. You've already learned that a promise can be made with a cup, with a gift, with a marriage, with a shared sacrifice. But now you learn the heavier kind, the kind that comes from oaths. Because an oath is not only a promise to another man, it is a promise in front of witnesses, in front of the gods, in front of your own name. And the hardest thing about an oath is that it can come due at the worst time. In later Greek memory, the Trojan War doesn't begin because men are bored. It begins because men are bound by honor, bound by the fear of being called a liar, bound by the idea that refusing to show up would stain their households for generations. That is the engine. Not just desire, not just anger. Obligation. So before Troy, the atmosphere changes. A king who would have been content to fight local rivals starts thinking farther. A leader who would rather stay home begins to realize he may not be allowed to. And you, a young hero with your own ambitions, begin to realize that your personal hunger might soon be swallowed by something much bigger. There is a moment in every heroic life where the familiar world becomes too small. For some men, it happens when they first sail beyond the islands they can name. For others, it happens when they stand at a festival and notice how many important faces are in one place, all watching each other with polite smiles and guarded eyes. For you, it happens when the messengers start arriving. Not one, several. Arriving with the same tone, the same urgency, the same insistence that this is not a request. It is a summons. A messenger is never just a messenger. He is a test. How quickly you receive him shows your confidence. How much you feed him shows your strength. How carefully you question him shows your intelligence. And how you respond to his message tells the room what kind of man you are. Before Troy, the messages that matter are rarely detailed. They don't need to be. A single line is enough. Come. Bring ships. Bring men. Bring your best. Or explain, in public, why you can't. The public part is the blade. Because if you refuse privately, you can later pretend you never heard. If you refuse publicly, you become the story. Not the brave one. The weak one. The coward. The oath breaker. The man who stayed home while others won glory. A hero learns early that reputations don't die easily. So when the summons comes, you watch your father's face. You watch the older men's hands. You listen to the way the hall goes quiet, not in fear, but in calculation. How many ships can we spare? How many men can we take away from the fields without starving next winter? Who do we leave behind to guard the walls? Who do we trust to hold the household steady while the hero class leaves? These are not romantic questions. They are the questions that decide whether a warband returns to a living home or to smoke. And that is the first hard truth about the Trojan expedition. It isn't only a fight. It is logistics. It is supply. It is risk management in human form. If you are a young hero, this is where your training stops being theoretical. Now you see what it means to lead. Not on a hunting trip. Not in a wrestling ring. In the planning that happens before men die. Weapons are checked. Not admired. Checked. Spear shafts tested for cracks. Spearheads tightened. Straps inspected. Bronze greaves adjusted. A helmet's lining repaired. A shield's edge reinforced. Because nothing is more humiliating than dying from a failure that should have been caught in the courtyard. Your household's craftsmen become the real heroes for a few days. They work until their hands ache. They heat metal. They stitch leather. They patch. They polish. They do the quiet work that keeps the loud men alive. Meanwhile, the storerooms start changing shape. Grain is measured out. Oil is packed. Wine is allocated. Dried foods gathered. Water containers inspected. Rope checked. Oars repaired. The household becomes a packing machine. And that's when you feel the weight of the decision. Because the moment you begin packing, you're admitting you might not come back. No one says it, but everyone knows. A war is not a hunt. A war is a long season where the gods, the weather, and human mistakes all get a vote. The women of the household move differently now. Not frantic, focused. They know what needs to be prepared for the men leaving. They also know what needs to be prepared for the men not returning. It's a brutal kind of competence. Clothes are folded. Cloaks repaired. Bandages gathered. Oil and herbs collected for cuts and infections. A good household does not pretend wounds won't happen. It prepares to manage them. And then there are the conversations that happen in corners. A mother speaking to a son, with her hand on his cheek a moment too long. A wife speaking to her husband with an intensity that is half love and half warning. A sister reminding her brother of who will be watching his reputation while he's gone. Because war doesn't only test courage, it tests discipline. It tests restraint. It tests whether a man can keep his mouth shut in the wrong moment. Before Troy, you already know what a feud is. You already know how a careless insult can become a years-long blood debt. Now imagine that same code carried into a coalition camp full of proud men. That's what waits for you. Not just enemies. Allies with sharp edges. So household elders give advice that sounds simple and is hard to follow. Hold your temper. Respect the chain of command. Don't take a prize that isn't yours. Don't embarrass your king. Don't embarrass your household. Be generous when you can. Be dangerous when you must. And above all, don't become the kind of story that people tell with a laugh. Now, later myth paints some heroes as eager, others as reluctant. The interesting thing is that both versions can be true at once. A man can want glory and still fear leaving. A man can believe in an oath and still resent it. A man can love his home and still feel pulled toward the sea. That tension is what makes the pre-Troy years feel alive. Because these aren't modern soldiers trained for a national cause. They are elite men trained for personal honor. And now they are being asked to tie their honor to a larger project. That is difficult. It creates friction. And friction is where stories ignite. This is why the traditions around the gathering of the Greek leaders are full of little dramas. Not because ancient storytellers were bored. Because a coalition is always fragile. It needs constant reinforcement. In the later cycle of Trojan War stories, one of the strongest themes is that some heroes tried to avoid the summons. That detail makes sense culturally, even if the exact episodes vary by source. If a man stays home, he keeps his household intact. He keeps control. He avoids the unpredictable chaos of a distant campaign. And if he is clever, he may even think he can dodge the obligation without losing face. But obligation is a net. It catches clever men too. So the stories tell of tricks and counter-tricks. A hero feigns madness. A hero hides. A hero gets dragged back into the light by another hero who knows the rules. Whether every detail happened exactly that way is less important than what the tradition is admitting. Even in a culture that worships glory, leaving home is terrifying. Now think about the place where the coalition gathers. The shoreline. The port. The wide, noisy zone where land and sea meet and everything smells like salt, sweat, tar, fish, and wet rope. In later Greek memory, Aulis becomes one of the famous names. A staging point. A bottleneck. A place where many leaders assemble and then sit, trapped by wind and by divine displeasure, until something breaks the stillness. And whether you treat Aulis as a literal historical assembly point or as a tradition-sharpened image, the concept is believable. A coalition needs a meeting place. It needs a place where ships can gather, where supplies can be organized, where leaders can look each other in the eye and measure commitment, where oaths can be invoked and renewed. Picture it slowly. Ships pulled up on shore, oars stacked, masts rising, sails folded, men sleeping on the ground in clusters, each cluster tied to its home kingdom, smoke from many fires, sounds overlapping, different accents of Greek, different styles of armor, different kinds of confidence, and in the middle of it the kings, men who are used to being the center of their own halls, now forced to share a camp. That alone is enough to cause tension. You can imagine how the first arguments start. Not about Troy, about status. Who gets the best place to beach their ships? Who gets the best share of water? Who gets to speak first in a council? Who sits closest to the main king? Because even here, before the first spear is thrown at an enemy, the heroic code is already at work. Everyone is watching. Everyone is remembering. And everyone is imagining the song that will be sung about this expedition. Now add one more pressure. The gods. In later Greek stories, the delay at the mustering point becomes a divine problem. The wind refuses to cooperate. The seer interprets. A grievance with a goddess is named. A payment is demanded. And the payment is not small. These stories exist in multiple versions, and the versions do not always agree. In some, a sacrifice happens. In others, the sacrifice is prevented at the last moment. In still others, the whole episode becomes a moral warning about what ambition can demand. What matters for your lived experience in a Bronze Age heroic world is the underlying belief. When a coalition stalls, people look for meaning. When weather refuses, people assume someone offended something. When men begin to grumble, leaders need a story that can turn impatience into obedience. A divine explanation does that. It gives the delay purpose. It gives the suffering meaning. It gives the leaders leverage. And it reminds everyone that even kings are not fully in charge. So your pre-Troy life becomes a threshold. Not yet war. Not yet home. A long pause where the world feels suspended. The men in camp start telling stories to kill time, not the polished songs of a palace hall. Rougher camp talk. Boasts. Insults. Arguments. And in that atmosphere, alliances can strengthen. They can also crack. If you are a young hero, this camp is your first real taste of coalition politics. You have met rivals at festivals before. This is different. You are trapped together. There is nowhere to go. Every mistake repeats. Every insult echoes. And because men are bored and tense, the smallest friction can become a feud. So you learn camp etiquette. Who you can joke with. Who you must not. Who is quick to anger. Who hides anger until it becomes dangerous, who is generous, who is suspicious, who is quietly terrified and pretending not to be. And you learn another truth. A war band doesn't move as one mind. It moves as a crowd. A crowd is driven by emotions. And the men who can steer emotions are as important as the men who can throw a spear. Before Troy, this is how the leaders build momentum. They hold councils. They call meetings. They perform unity. They remind everyone of shared obligations. They invoke oaths. They distribute gifts. They sacrifice. They find ways to turn a pile of individual ambitions into a single direction. And if you listen closely, you can hear the story being built in real time. Not just the story of Troy, the story of the heroes who went, who argued, who obeyed, who resisted, who were dragged there by shame, who went willingly, who went because they couldn't bear the thought of being left behind. Now, on the final nights before departure, the mood shifts again. Because once the ships leave the shore, the familiar world is already gone. The camp feels like a temporary city, a city that will dissolve the moment the wind changes. Men sleep and wake in restless cycles. Someone is always sharpening something. Someone is always checking straps. Someone is always telling a story about what might happen. Someone is always trying to predict the future. And beneath all of it is the simple awareness that this expedition is not a local raid. It is an attempt to reach across the sea and punish a distant city. That scale is unusual. It demands commitment. It demands supplies. It demands leadership. It demands a kind of patience most heroes don't naturally have. So you begin to understand what Troy represents. Not only an enemy city, a proving ground, a place where every heroic pattern will be magnified. Generosity will become competition over spoils. Pride will become conflict between kings. Bravery will become a grind of years. Friendship will be tested by grief. Strategy will become survival. And the stories you grew up hearing will stop being entertainment. They will become expectations. Because once you leave, people at home will be telling stories about you. Not about what you did yet. About what you are going to do. They will imagine you as already victorious. Already famous. Already transformed. And that imagined version of you will start living without your permission. That is one of the strangest sensations a hero can have. To realize that your legend is already traveling while you are still alive. Now, there is one last thing you do before leaving. You return to the rituals that keep your world stable. You make offerings. Maybe small, maybe larger. You ask the gods for safe travel, for victory, for honor, for a return. And you don't ask with certainty. You ask with the same practical fear you've always carried, because you know the gods are not obligated to be kind. So you bargain. You promise. You say you will give something if you return. And you tell yourself quietly that you will keep the promise. Then you think of your home, of the hall, of the hearth, of the storerooms, of the people who will keep working while you are gone, of the people who will keep the household alive and keep your name warm inside the walls. And that is where the pre-Troy story ends. Not with a battle, with a departure, with the feeling of walking away from something solid and stepping onto something that moves. You stand near the surf. You smell the sea. You hear the creak of wood. You watch men hauling supplies. You watch kings pretending they aren't nervous. And you understand that everything you've learned up to now, every rule of the hall, every lesson of the hunt, every ritual at a shrine, every quiet political calculation is about to be tested in the most public arena your world can imagine. Troy is still a name across the water, but it has already reached into your life. It has already begun reshaping your friendships, your obligations, your reputation, your sleep. And as the first ships begin to edge forward, as oars dig into water and the shoreline starts to slide away behind you, you realize something that makes your chest feel both heavy and strangely calm. Before Troy, you lived like a hero in training. After this moment, you will live like a hero under judgment, not only from enemies, from allies, from your household, from the gods, and from the story that is already being written about you, one retelling at a time. And that's a good place to let the shoreline fade. Let the sea settle into a soft, steady rhythm in your mind. Let the campfires dim. Let the voices of the kings blur into background noise. And just imagine your hero lying down for a moment on a folded cloak, listening to the water lap against the hull, feeling the slow sway of the world under him. No speeches, no rushing, just that quiet in-between right before the story turns into war. If you're enjoying these slow journeys through history and mythology, take a second to like the video and subscribe so you can catch the next one. And if you feel like it, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, get comfortable. Loosen your jaw. Let your shoulders drop. And as the ships glide out into the dark water, you can let your thoughts drift with them. Slow and easy. Until sleep takes over.